Hey everyone, so I recently had the pleasure of sitting down and talking with Denny Sargent. Denny is one of the founders of Horus-Maat Lodge. He is the author of numerous titles, including Your Holy Guardian Angel and You, Global Ritualism, and this year, Werewolf Magick. Our conversation ran the gamut. We covered everything from feral magic to the unconscious, to Carl Jung, to Tantra, to the Holy Guardian Angel, and we got to hear a lot of Denny's life story as well. I think you guys are going to get a lot of value out of this. Let's get started.
You guys can go back to being natural now.
Yeah, fuck you. What do you mean natural? What kind of hippie bullshit is that? Arr!
So you got a new book.
I have a new book coming out. Yes, I'm pretty excited.
We've seen the cover. I've seen the cover art of it.
Yes.
And I know you've been working on it.
Yes.
But what I don't necessarily know about is what's the book called?
It's called Werewolf Magick, which seems silly and rather pretentious, but what I became fascinated with werewolves.
It doesn't seem pretentious to me. It's just very it's very specific.
Right.
It's actually the opposite of pretentious.
Okay.
I'm actually kind of curious, what that is, because I've never heard of that before.
Okay, so I went through a very, very difficult time in my life several years ago, and was deeply depressed and started to peel away all the layers, of my psyche and my issues and everything, and got down to dealing with the shadow. If you're interested in Jung, you are. So I have several paradigms. Jung is definitely one, and a lot of problems people have is they're not dealing with their shadow, right? Mm-hmm. They're not dealing with that dark side, which a lot of people see as demonic. What I realized...
You mean the murder and mayhem part, or what?
Just the dark side of your soul, you have your self, which is roughly connects with the Holy Guardian Angel, and then you have the shadow, which Crowley called the blind creature of the slime, right? It's our inner... Well, I had an epiphany that we all have a monster inside of us. I mean, we're all monsters, right?
Sure.
And mine was clearly a werewolf because it started showing up in meditation, it actually became a guide through the abyss for me. And I became more and more involved in werewolves. And then I went through all my old writings from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and I had been writing about werewolves all along, and I didn't even realize it. So this was how my shadow manifested. And I knew I had to work through the shadow and the underworld of the hell I was going through to come out into some kind of new life that I wasn't sure what it was going to be. So I started to write stuff and do stuff for Werewolf Magick, which was I would go out on the full moon and just unleash my shadow in the woods, often taking off all my clothes and just running around and look crazy, and just like... Then I started creating rituals.
You're just embracing it.
I'm just
embracing
it.
I'm just going to go toward it.
I was totally going to embrace it. In fact, the line that came from a friend of mine was, when I kept saying, oh my God, I'm being painted as a monster, was you need to embrace your monster. That became my mantra, embrace it, the blind creature.
Oh, I say, you felt like you were being painted as a monster by other people.
By other people.
And you're like, I'm going to take this as a signal.
Exactly. And I also know that I have a dark side, and I have, the shit I was going through sort of brought to the fore, I get angry. We all have things that we do that we're not proud of, or It's just part of who we are. And the other thing I realized as I went through this journey was that, and this is sort of the core rationale of the book, is that most of the problems we have in our culture have to do with the fact that we have disconnected from nature. Mm-hmm. Our entire Judeo-Christian culture has disconnected from nature. The holy books that most people in the world venerate say God gave humanity the nature to do with whatever they want, and that animals don't have souls and people do. And you talk to tribal cultures, like I interviewed Olchi shamans years ago, and I worked with Olchi shamans from Siberia, real shamans. And I've talked to many people who are tribal over the years, and they don't ever see separation between animals and people. In fact, they think it's a huge, original sin to make that distinction, that we are not animals. Of course we're animals. We know logically we are. But we've been programmed our whole lives. No, we are above animals. We have souls. They don't. This has been part of our gestalt, right? So going through this work, I mean, the ritual work lent me down the path to research, which is often how I do things. Like I experience things, I dive in head first with not a lot of thought sometimes, and then I go back and research. And what I found
was... what was your process like with the rituals? You were just kind of just seeing where your instinct took you with it,
I was seeing where my instinct took me, and where it took me was no words, like nonverbal. And I mean, I can go up a few paths, but I'll go down one side path quickly. I for 30 years, I put together my Pan book, which is sort of my, if I die tomorrow and the Pan book continues, I'll be happy. That's my greatest work. And one of the things that kind of prepared me for, and Pan has been my tutelary deity since I was 15. So that has prepared me for being connected with the animal and nature and being part of it. And that being a key to gnosis for me is...
Sure, I would think that would be like nature magic.
Right, that's nature magic. Yeah. And sort of this is a little bit darker, more animalistic, more feral magic, but it's still of the part. And the Pan stuff informed that, so I kind of had some ideas of where to go. And the number one thing I got was no words, like no cognition. Like the trick is to get down into your amygdala, into your lower cortex, what Carl Sagan called the reptile brain. Okay. And when we are truly in trance, or when we're truly letting go of our conscious mind and moving into another state, we often go down to the lower cortex. And that's where I started working with and started figuring like, what magical things can I do? What physical things can I do that will eliminate my cognitive thinking completely and just put me in an animal state? Mm-hmm. And while still retaining a connection with my holy guardian angel, if that makes sense, so that I'm not like running amok and killing, people in the woods, mostly. But
that was kind of gonna be my next question about it. It's like, so, like, how do you draw the distinction between like coming into contact with these energies versus being like dominated by them and driven by them? What's the difference there? What's that process like?
That's a key thing. So I did knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel, and my guardian angel has been guiding me through everything, including this. Mm-hmm. But so I have my guardian angel, which is my higher self, and Crowley does a really good job of talking about this. You reach up for the angel. You also have to reach down for the creature of the slime, right? Mm-hmm. You have to do both. And Jung said the same thing. If you're going for yourself, you have got to deal with your shadow. Mm-hmm. So I felt like I hadn't completely worked with my shadow. I hadn't really integrated my shadow as well as I needed to. And I think most people haven't. And the key to that happening is nature. Because to me, nature is the primal arena for everything to occur. Like nature gives us everything and everything goes back to nature. So doing werewolf magic without the guidance of my HA would have just made me like a serial killer or a monster or something, right? So, and I talk about that in the book, but I think it's really important actually now that I'm talking about it more obliquely, or more directly, less obliquely, to someone who understands what I'm saying when I say Holy Guardian Angel. Because since I did knowledge and conversation, my ego gets in the way and mucks things up. When I sit in meditation and push it aside, my angel tells me exactly what to do. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of was the whole idea of doing knowledge and conversation, was then you don't need anybody else.
So it sounds like what you're saying is like there was a kind of anchor.
Yes.
In there.
There was a divine anchor. I often visualized it as an anthro wolf, like a werewolf. I have it on my door, the picture on my door. And with the full moon is, of course, like indicative of sort of the astral intensity of the working with the shadow at night, but a star, like when I visualize my werewolf familiar, as it were, my guide in all this, it has three eyes. It has, and the third eye open means that it's an aware wolf, which I know is a joke, but it's informed by the self, mm-hmm. but without the ego. So it's self beast without ego, and that was the key to the whole thing. Was
that's interesting. What that brings to mind for me is there's this sort of like ambiguity in the kind of spiritual work that we do when we talk about like the unconscious or intuition. Like that can mean either kind of going down into what's termed like the animal soul, but it could also mean neshama. Right, which is sort of like the intuitive connection with divinity. Absolutely. And sometimes it's really unclear what people are talking about when they talk about like the unconscious. But like you've explicitly brought them together into one image.
And the key to it is not intellectualizing. Okay. It's not talking. So almost all the rituals I do in Werewolf Magic do not use words. They use growls, howls, up howls, arr, down howls, arr.
So have you like systematized this? You have, okay.
The book is an entire grimoire of how to do this.
Now, how did you come up with like which howls kind of go with what? Is that like a thing that you just felt through, or
out in the woods on full moon?
Did you go and run around with wolves?
Okay, it's a funny story because I was living in an apartment, and there were 70 acres of woods butting up against my apartment. And when I started doing this work, the coyotes started to run past my window at night. So, I'd wake up, I would do a werewolf magic thing, and I'd wake up and I'd hear this.
We're calling you, Denny.
And
we're calling you.
And then I'd go out and I'd be like, was that a dream, right? And then I'd go out and there they were. So, real magic manifests, right? And then the owls came too. That's a whole other conversation. So, because I was trying to piece together.
You're like a Disney princess in this
well,
scenario.
more like the beast than the princess. But the question to me then was, what are the deities? And then I worked through that and got names given to me. But then I looked like Hecate became very important to this work.
Talk about that. How did Hecate come into this?
The owls started showing up, and then. And through some of the horrible things I was going through in my personal life and in my economic life, Hecate started showing up through people saying to me, "You really need to call on her." And she'd been sort of peripherally to me. I'd never really worked with her very much. Okay. Once I connected with her, she immediately showed up. And then the owls started to show, like hundreds of them at night. You'd hear them howling, hooting, and chasing around, and. So I started working. So I started as I got further into the werewolf gnosis. I was trying to figure out what are the deity forms, and the moon was clearly important. So Artemis, Selene, and Hecate became the three forms that just kept showing up in dreams and in visions, and when I was working. And I would go out with no paper or pencil or anything, and I would bring a few simple things, and I would ask. I would meditate and. The wolf would come to me and say to me, "You need just bring these simple things, all natural, never anything artificial." And then,
so what you're saying, just to get clear, you're saying that initially it was this magical interaction with moon energy, femininity, which kind of brought you out, and then the wolf energy showed up, or were they there before?
The wolf was before. The wolf saved me from. I was in deep depression. I actually was I would say suicidal at certain points. I was like completely walled off, felt I had been rejected from life, figured that my work was done. I'm at a certain age and I've done a lot of good work and I'm really happy. And then in meditation, the wolf started showing up as an entity. The three-eyed wolf is what I call him, and would say, and then I started getting like the reality. The whole universe started saying things to me like "embrace your monster." The young book kind of fell open one day, and I was like, "Oh shit, that's." And so it all kind of just the less I intellectualized, the less I thought about it, more things came, and I kept being told like, "Stop thinking, like go out, like don't sit in your room, go out, take walks in the moon, lit woods." At night at 2 a.m. and be like experience it. And then I had a couple of situations where I actually went up into the wilderness and did that, and that's in the book too, like just completely letting go of it all. And
so what'd you do? Did you go out like camping for a few days, or like what did you?
And I'm not sure exactly what I should say. I did mushrooms basically, and just unleashed, and invoked the werewolf gnosis, and took off all my clothes except sandals. I figured like I didn't want to destroy my feet, and went roaming in deep forest at night under a full moon, and it was an astounding experience. I've done it a couple of times now, where if you going completely feral and non-conscious. I had no fear at all. In fact, I snuck up on animals at night and scared the crap out of them. I scared a raccoon and a deer who did not hear me coming. It was really fun. So, I experienced it. That was it. And then I would have these experiences and come back, and then I would go into my conscious mind. It would all be fragmented. I'd be like, how am I going to write about this? And then I would start.
So were you thinking about writing about it at that point? Like when did that occur to you to kind of, because that seems sort of like an about face, like you're kind of deep in this stuff.
That's right.
And feeling your way.
I started writing rituals. Like I started getting these rituals of things that worked and didn't work. And I started taking notes. I was taking tons of notes. And then different people looked at me and said, "You should write a book." I said, "Nobody's going to want a book on this." You know? so I,
Why did you think nobody would want a book on it? Because
it sounds whack. It sounds totally whack, man. I mean, let's be werewolves. You know, even I said it. I said, "No, I'm doing werewolf magic," and people would look at me and go, and I'd say, "Okay, never mind." You know. No, I do tantra too. That's safe, right? Not really, but okay.
Tantra is safe on this scale.
No, that's scale, right? That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So being an academic, of course, then I had to go do research, and what I discovered was there have been intense magical occult werewolf cults from ancient Greece, but very likely before, and there are all these werewolf temples. Up on Mount Lycaon, which is the Wolf Mountain in Greece. It's one of the oldest temples ever. It's now it then became the center of Lycaon or Lycaea Zeus, who was the werewolf Zeus god. But
weren't they associated with Apollo too, or am I imagining that?
And Apollo. So off that Wolf Mountain, there was a Wolf Pan temple and a Wolf Apollo temple, and Apollo has been from the earliest time connected with wolves. Like, I didn't know this. And his sister Artemis, who actually was a goddess I was starting to work with, him and her have a long history with wolves because their mother, to save them in mythology, turned into a wolf.
Oh, okay.
And they have and in the Parthenon, not the Parthenon, the Parthenon, there is a statue and a temple to Wolf Apollo. And there's to Wolf Zeus. So once I started digging, I was like, holy shit, right? There's like these, and the priests are almost called, like in Lupercalia, moving to Rome. I'm not going to go down the whole thing because you have to buy the book, right? So
buy the book.
So Lupercalia, the Luperci were the priests of Lupercalia, and in Lupercalia, you know the basic story of Lupercalia, like these, the half naked priest wearing goat skin, sacred to Faunus, who was the god. He was the Roman Pan, but also associated with wolves. So he became an important deity for him that I was working with. But they would run amok. Everyone would get drunk in Rome. All the women who wanted fertility, it could be anything, would come out and show as much flesh as they wanted, and they would whip them with goat skins. You probably know this.
And with the whipping,
yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so the priests were called Luperci, which means werewolf.
Yeah.
Basically, wolf person. And I was like, wow, that's kind of explicit. And they went through a whole ritual where a dog was sacrificed, but apparently much earlier a wolf was, because it's the only ritual in the entire Roman religion where a dog is sacrificed. And the blood is put on them, and they drink the blood with goat milk. So you get this goat wolf thing. Anyway, that's just one thing.
I mean, there has to be a fascination with wolves going very far back. Otherwise, we wouldn't have dogs.
All the way back. Well, that's really important. That's really important.
You don't think about it. I mean, we have dogs as pets, but that means that we had to have had a very long-standing relationship.
We have a long
with wolves.
and all the way back. Like I hung out with these shamans, right? Who are the earliest images I could find are 40,000 years ago in caves, and there are werewolves. There are human wolves. I have one I can show you, and so and they're called theriomorphs. You've probably heard that, where different images on the rock walls are animal people. Okay, they're people who turned into beasts, and it's a perennial thing in all ancient cultures up until the religions of the book, as it were, Islam and etc. And Christianity. So in all the ancient cultures, including ancient Greece, ancient Rome, the idea of being turning into animals was perfectly legit. I mean, you read a lot of Greek and Roman history. They constantly have stories about,
that's all the Egyptian gods too.
Yeah. And I mean, I found like a lot of people. Herodotus has several stories of, so and so would turn into a wolf and do this, and then there was a bunch of Romans who did the same thing. So shape-shifting has been the norm in occult history, which I didn't realize until I started doing this. Only until, like, the Hermetic stuff peels it right off, right? And Egyptian...
What do you mean by that?
They don't talk at all about turning into animals. I've never heard of that in Hermetic traditions, of literally turning into a beast. It's sort of it's been the general idea has been an advance that we've been polluted with in terms of Western culture, is we rise above animals and become more divine. Like there's divinity, there's the animal, we're moving up. In fact, I realized it's absolutely the same.
It seems to harken back in some ways to like journeys to the underworld.
Yeah.
And sort of like transitional figures. I mean, that's a big part of Western.
It is. And the key thing that's often missing though is uniting that shadow, uniting that beast with that angel, as opposed to, I've realized it's not a ladder. Mm-hmm. You're not climbing from beast. No, it's like Pan is the perfect image. He's half man, half beast. Mm-hmm. Like that's the optimal, in my opinion.
That's not like a confrontation with like just the unconscious and like bringing things that are unconscious into consciousness. And yeah,
I like Jung's view of it better, which is an integration. Mm-hmm. Because I think right now we're at a stage of it's a confrontation. I think in tribal cultures, Native American cultures, Siberian shaman cultures, it was never a confrontation. We were part of that. Like the woman I bought my dog from, she has a wolf tattoo because, as she said to me, that's my totem. Like I'm a wolf. And so and for a typical modern American to say I'm a wolf, people would be like, no, you're not, right? But she doesn't mean it. She didn't mean it humorously or as a kind of simile. She meant it authentically. Mm-hmm. Like, this is my lineage. And when I traveled around Australia, everywhere, most places I traveled, like Japan is obvious. They believe in the existence of werewolves in Tokyo. Like, you ask Japanese students, do you believe in werewolves? They'll be like, oh yeah, there are people here who can turn into wolves. We believe it. And that's all part of the shamanic Shinto tradition. And a lot of these places, like in Japan, they worship Okami. Okami is the wolf god. And there's tons of anime on it and stuff like that. But so, we have to start seeing divinity in terms of the beast, our beast selves, and also nature, because we're destroying and killing everything.
It's like we have, you probably agree, we have so much sickness in the world now, and a moment ago we were talking about the connection between wolves and Apollo. Apollo's a god of healing.
Right.
And shamans were typically the healers of their tribes. Have you found this spiritual journey healing for you? You talked about being in pretty desperate straits. Yeah. It sounds like it was a big part of your healing journey. You're here. You made it. Mostly.
I'm as here as I'm going to be. As I get older, I'm not going to be quite as here. But no, I'm actually healthier, happier. I look better. If you look at... I had a moment I looked at my driver's license from 10 years ago. And I got a new one and I look 10 years younger than I did. So I'm doing better. I feel much more vital than I do because I'm... So part of the book is that, so what does this do for you, right? Doing this kind of thing.
Right.
It's just, and what I got clearly was that it increases your instincts and your intuition and insight, which are three marvelous things in any magical system, right? And instinct is our genetic connection with our group unconscious mind, where we know something, like we meet someone, we know they're bad, and that's our animal mind is reacting. Like he'll growl at people who look perfectly nice. He'll see somebody wag their tail, turn his, or go into a room and back out, right? Mm. And we all have that, right?
Sure.
We all have moments when we're like, I don't want to be here. This something's not right here.
Absolutely.
But there's no, and then people go, oh, you're imagining things, or oh, like why? And you don't have a rational answer for it, right? So part of what we've lost, our culture, and we have lost, is our instincts. We've really lost them. When we tune in more to them, they start to pop up more and more, and you get that instinct. And I think the Holy Guardian Angel works through instinct a lot.
Okay.
Like my angel will say, I'll just suddenly know, like, no, you need to do this now. And if I start intellectualizing, my ego takes over and go, oh, you can wait till tomorrow. Then always I get, the good thing about having that connection with your divine self is it's immediate. Like the feedback's immediate, right? Like, you need to do this now. Oh, I'll do it tomorrow. And then it breaks. And you're like, oh, I should have listened, right? Sure. So I see really what working with the beast is really just, you're just cutting out the middleman. You're cutting out all your programming, and you're cutting out your ego and all your Judeo-Christian culture, everything that we've been immersed in. You're pushing it out, and you're creating a direct connection between your higher self and your beast self. And then you just live an intuitive life. Like, that's Taoism in a sense, right? Mm-hmm. You're just going with what, just like animals, they don't think, oh, we're gonna prowl down here tomorrow, and we're gonna prowl there tomorrow, and here's our chart for where we're prowling, right? They do, right? They don't. But they do what it is they do because they know what to do. They don't think about it. They don't question it. And wolves are incredibly smart, but they are instinctual, you know? And he's the same way. Like, he is always going to sit next to me because I am his big wolf, right? I'm his alpha wolf. And that's just how he's going to be, you know?
So how do you keep it from becoming just like escapism and not dealing with your stuff? Because that can happen too.
For sure. That's a really good question. How much of it is escapism? I'm sure some of it is. I mean, the world sucks right now in so many ways. And you know, running around howling in the woods is like a great, if nothing else, great therapy, I realized. And you feel better.
Some primal therapy.
Primal screaming.
Yeah.
I'm going to call it primal howling, package it, and make $1 million, right? I can do S-like seminars, you know. Like, you know, feeling bad, you need to howl, you know. Which is kind of my overall commercial, like, have you howled recently? Really, seriously howled. But the other thing is, it's made me a lot more, I'm very much different from the rest of the people I know in my generation. Like, I don't fucking care about a lot of stuff, and I'm much more playful, and I don't really care that much about how people see me. You know, mm-hmm. I'm much more spontaneous. I'm in a different headspace, and I'm sure I offend more people, but I'm generally happier and feel better. I'm amassing all this stuff, and then I'm doing all this anal retentive historical research and finding, like, you know, werewolf cults all over the place. Finding a lot in Scandinavia, a lot come out mm-hmm. of the Norse traditions, like skin changers, skinwalkers, and whatnot. And what amazed me though was in Celtic areas, werewolves were almost uniformly seen as positive. They were warriors, warriors that could change into werewolves, i.e. berserker types, right? Mm-hmm. Were venerated, and there's whole Irish tribes that still today, you know, claim that they are werewolves. St. Patrick, I love this. St. Patrick, when he was trying to convert the heathens, this one tribe, and I can't remember the name of it, said no. Like, the king showed up and with his whole group and said no, and St. Patrick cursed them to be werewolves for 7 years. Yeah. And in the myth, I mean, I pulled this right out of a Catholic book, right? Yeah. They all turned into wolves were cursed for 7 years to being werewolves, until, you know, they accepted Jesus but they never accepted Jesus, right? So they were like, fuck you, and they were like, all right, we're werewolves. And so every 7 years they come back to being human, but they're always known as they're still known as the werewolf clan, right? Mm-hmm. And they're perfectly happy with that, right? They're very proud of it. So, and then there's these werewolves in Scotland that are they're like helpers. They fish. They're called wolverines. I find all this, when you start digging, you'd be surprised how much werewolf, it's everywhere. Like it's everywhere. And they fish, and then they leave baskets of fish to poor people who need food. That's what they do. Like,
what about outside of Europe? Did you look at any of those?
So it depends on what the apex predator is, right? So everywhere that the wolf was the apex predator, that's werewolf was a big thing. You go into Africa, you have were hyenas, lions. There's a lot of were hyena stuff. Morocco, there are whole families of people that are known as were hyenas, and they're all ironworkers.
Wow.
Like smithies. I know, right?
That's interesting.
I know. I found so much interesting shit. I found out that Anubis in Egypt, Anubis is actually a wolf. And they just came up with this, and I cited the research papers. It was a golden wolf. It was not a jackal.
Jackal, right?
Right. There are two Egyptian wolf gods. There's Wepoet, who was a standard, what we know as wolf, and then there was Anubis, who was a golden wolf. Mm-hmm. So the wolf stuff, wherever the wolves have been apex predators, they've been the big thing.
What about bears? Like in North
bears
America?
Are huge. Yeah, bears. There's a whole. I could do a whole book on werebears too. But yeah.
somebody told me a long time ago that some Native American tribes venerated bears, and they considered humans and bears to be pretty similar.
That's right.
They dealt with their environment.
A lot too. The Norse did too. The two kinds of berserkers that the Norse had, they had lots of people who changed into wolves, and there's lots of language, and I put a bunch in the book, but I had to edit a bunch out because I had reams of research. But it's wolves and bears are the two things.
Interesting.
Because they're both apex predators, and they're both badass, right? And so if you're going to like turn into something on the battlefield, either one of those works.
Yeah, there aren't too many things that are going to eat
bear. Like a marmot. You know what I mean? I'm going to be
were marmot.
I'm a were rabbit. I'm going to hit you with this carrot. Yeah, no, you want to like kill mass people, right? And there's tons of like the sagas, and there's tons of histories of like the Vikings landing, to loot a town, and the who goes first is the berserkers, and they there are Christians who are fighting them who see them shapeshift into these monstrous forms that they get shot with arrows, nothing stops them, they get stabbed, and they just swept right through the troops in England and Scotland, and they were the shock troops. So I don't know. So I went too far with this, obviously. I mean, I'm like, look, more werewolf cults, Oh, this is so good. I like the werewolf cults. And then I could go on and on, but that's that book. So I went to Pantheacon last year.
Yeah. And
I had 5 things. I wanted to get back into writing books again. And I had one on Tantra I was really wanting to do. They looked at me and they're like, no, Tantra doesn't sell, which I've heard many times. Right. And this one, no, not this one, this one. Werewolf Magick, that's the one they grabbed.
That's the one they bid on.
That is the one they grabbed. And I'm like, are you seriously? Really? That's the... No, this is the shit right here.
We were like, well, I got this other thing that I've been thinking about. You're not going to be interested in that? Like, we'll take that.
That's right.
We'll take your
That's exactly what happened. And then I met with the Weiser rep too, because I met with Llewellyn and Weiser, and I said, these are the things I'm pitching. Yeah. And she was like, no. Werewolf Magick. I go, I almost like, are you shitting me?
It's because nobody else, I've never heard of that.
Right. Nobody's ever done it, and that's what they said.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they're going to release it before Halloween. I'm like, all right, bring it on. It's okay. That's fine.
Well, they say so, if you're going to target a niche, you want, that overlap between something that nobody else has done, but it's familiar to people. So,
exactly.
People know nature magic.
That's right.
Right? They know veneration of nature.
And don't even mention witchcraft. Oh, God, how many books are out there, right? Rewriting the same thing over and over again. So you kind of
you landed on,
that
magic spot.
I think I hit something that is unique enough that it actually might do well. And I really believe that if people actually dive into it and do it, it's going to help them. Because really, one, if it just gets people to go out in nature without fearing, being out in the wilderness, because everybody's terrified to go out and they bring guns and, oh my God, what about the crackheads? It's like, no, rip off your clothes and howl. No one will fuck with you. Trust me. Trust me. I go out here in my backyard, and I the first time I moved here, I'm like,
the neighbors must love that.
No one said a word.
I was like, if they don't dare.
They don't dare. That's the secret. I was like, if they call the cops, all right, then I know I can't do this. And
never happened.
Nope.
That's interesting.
And every full moon, I'm out there, and they probably think it's the dog, right? Oh. Like, oh my God, they should let that poor dog in,
So being out, so you never experienced fear while just being out there?
Not once I got into the state. You always go through a period of fear.
That's what I was about to say.
It's panic.
I've been out in the woods.
It's panic. Myself. That's where it comes from. Panic, right? When you are going to go through the liminal, it's all about liminal states. When you go through this liminal state of letting go of your humanity and moving into a pure bestial form, pure feral form, there's a lot of fear. Your ego goes nuts. Your ego's like, no, you can't let go of me. You need me. You can't. No, there's crackheads. And then it's just, and then once you make that leap, and I don't need. Fuck you. Then all of a sudden it's absolutely freeing on every level, because you're relying on your instincts, and you're also relying on some aggression too. And aggression is a great way to overcome fear. That's a classic way to do it. Aggression and release. Regression and play are the two balances, because I slipped from aggression into play very quickly. This is fucking fun. And so and if you've really managed to jump through it, and every initiation has to have a fear element, right?
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, what's the point? If you can't let go of your ego, the initiation's not going to happen.
Sure.
I mean, I had an initiation where I was blindfolded and went through all this stuff and had a knife put at me, and they said, you have failed and now must die. And I knew it was a ritual, but you have that moment you're like, fuck, right? Like, I just want to be a witch. I don't want to die, So yes, fear is crucial. Fear, and Pan has told me that many times. It's a like an alchemical elixir, but it has to be true panic. It can't just be like
courage is the quality. I think that it's the first quality that you need for doing.
I agree.
All this stuff.
That's absolutely right.
For any kind of growth, really.
I would say the second one is the ability to let go of prior understandings, paradigms you think are real. You have to, for magic to work, you have to let go of all the shit that's been shoved in your head since you were a little kid. That no, that doesn't work. No, that's not real. When I was a little kid, I used to leave my body every night and travel. Like I literally would go to sleep. I would leave my body, see my body, fly around in my astral form, whatever, until my parents told me, no, that's not real. That's not real. That doesn't happen. It's a dream. And it stopped. Right? Like that's a great analogy for you tell people something, it becomes part of their samsara, it becomes part of their maya, right? Like we're projecting and creating our reality all the time. If I'm like, oh, if I run into that wall, it'll hurt me, then that's going to happen. And then there's other people who feel like you can bend and twist reality if you believe things in a certain way. I think magic is that liminal space where we have to enter believing that our magic is real. And if we do, then it becomes real. I mean, I started doing this Ganesh thing. It was like I needed money, right? I'm like in a bad situation. I really have to pay my rent. I need money. I don't want to chip away at my savings. So I said, all right, I'm gonna go away from my conscious ego and all this stuff. I'm gonna invoke Ganesh and say, Ganesh, remove the obstacles to me not getting money. And I started doing the Ganesh work. Like the next day I get a check. I get a check from something I wasn't expecting. It was like an electric bill I had overpaid or something. All of a sudden it's like, so that's magic, right? Like someone would say, oh, well, that's just a coincidence. Then I get a call from a mom saying, I know I've called you several times, but I really want you to teach my autistic kid. Now, part of me is like, oh my God, I have a severely autistic kid. Really? Do I want to
do another one?
Do it. Well, I'm up to 5 now, right? And then I realized, no, this is my will. I have a degree in communications. I teach linguistics. I teach pedagogy. I teach language acquisition. I teach all about language. And I've been dealing with autism for 26 years. I actually am the perfect person to do this. Yeah, it's my wheelhouse, right? And I was like, okay. And then she came and then she said, there will be more. And within a week, within a week, I had 5 clients. Yeah. And they're desperate. They're desperate. They're desperate. They're barely hanging on there. And so Ganesh got me money. It didn't, it means I have to work for it, right? Sure. But still, that's magic. To me, magic is manifesting without, specifically maybe asking if you're really good at it. So.
Yeah, it's interesting when you first started telling this story in the sort of the instinctual way that you went at this. It's reminded me of experiences that I've had doing magic, and one of the things that I find so valuable about it is that it does have a way of, if you let go into it, it can balance certain things.
I think a lot of times we fuck things up by trying to fix them.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this interview with Denny. If you are, leave a comment below. Let me know what you're getting out of it. And don't forget to hit subscribe so that you can be alerted as soon as more content like this comes online. Let's get back to the interview.
I have been immersed in nature religions and paganism since I was 9 years old. And I led my friends, no, I was younger, I was probably 5. We used to play temple. Okay. We stole cigarettes from our parents. I made them join my cult. I created an image of a snake god in a garage I made them all go in line and light the cigarettes and sit and pray to the ancient gods. I was a very fucked up child.
Like you just so what'd you do? Like you chain smoked to the snake god?
We lit them as incense.
Oh,
I didn't even know what I was doing. I didn't even know what I was doing. I had no idea.
Okay.
So I was born a heathen.
Were you raised with? You're raised with religion.
I was raised with Presbyterianism, which is sort of religion,
oh, okay.
and it was fine. And
it's like Calvinism, like.
Yep, and I had to go to church every Sunday. And I was in the choir, and I did all those things, and I believed in divinity, but I was also involved in nature. I grew up in a house with lots of trees and gardens and stuff, and I always felt much more comfortable out in sitting in the grass in the gardens than I did sitting in the house. I was also almost autistic as a child. I rarely spoke. I prefer to be alone in the woods. And then I don't know what happened. It obviously changed, but my grandmother really had a lot of influence on me, and she said something that really triggered me. She took me to this beautiful tree. It was like hundreds of years old, and I sat under it, and she said, "This is my church. This is my religion." And I said, "It is mine too." And I was like, "Wow, this is a thing, right? It's not just me being weird." So I've been a pagan since I was conscious. When I turned 10, I got into Mithraism.
That's unique.
And I was probably 12 by the time I bought a Mithras ring, a reproduction. So when they dragged me to church, I would pray to Mithras while they prayed to Jesus.
And that was the ancient bull cult.
It was the sun god, right? Okay. The sun god, and he killed the bull that created the universe and all that. So then when I was 14, I started.
Now where did you grow up? Exactly?
Right outside of New York City, in a suburban area called Rye. It's a little town called Rye. You know Rye.
I know Rye.
Rye Playland. Everybody knows Rye Playland, right? And it was I hated the culture and the people, but it was very green and lovely and had lots of trees, and I had an idyllic childhood because it was long ago, and so basically we ran wild, like me and my friends in the neighborhood. All the parents would kick us out. None, and so zero. We did things that even now I look back going, oh my god, and. So that was my first feral experience, was like, go have fun, go play in the woods, go climb trees, fall out of trees, We'd come in and we'd go, here, shake it off, get out there, right? That's how it was, right? So I look, I've had lots of horrible things happen in my life. I've had my only son is severely autistic, and I've had 2 tracheotomies, and I was in an oxygen tent doing a lot of my early childhood, and on and on and on. I have all these horrible things. But I have a really cheerful, upbeat attitude, I think, because I had a really good childhood. I think have a good childhood, let your kids go play in the woods and be feral, and they will grow up to be good people, is my general rule. So I started corresponding, like I knew I was a pagan. Somehow I got a hold of something pagan. I mean, there was no internet or anything, right? I don't remember. I found a flyer or something. And Fate Magazine. That's what it was. What's that? Do you remember Fate Magazine? No, you don't. No. Fate Magazine was a little magazine about this big. It was the only occult magazine you could find, like at Woolworths or the 5 and 10 store or whatever it was. Okay. And it was about psychic events and people's experiences seeing ghosts, and in the back they had a whole little thing of one ads, and one was for I think it was for the Magical Child, what was then called the Warlock Shop. Right, in New York, which was the epicenter of occultism on the East Coast. And I wrote, I don't remember how I wrote a letter, and I got a letter back from Robert Carey. And he was 14 and I was 14. And he said, oh, they got this letter, but you're 14, so they gave it to me. And so
was he like working there or something? Or?
He was. So this was the 70s. So
fuck child labor laws.
fuck child labor. No, it gets better. So I write him and I go, oh yeah, blah blah blah. So we become pen pals, which was a thing then, right? Okay. And it was very quaint. It sounds very quaint and like Reader's Digest-y, right? And then he took the train out, and I met him, and we became best friends, and we have been best friends until even now. He's forgetting me now because of his Alzheimer's, but we're still. I mean, we've known each other since we were 14. Right?
Wow.
I know, it's kind of amazing, and so I went into New York and encountered witchcraft and paganism, like, and I was just like. And I knew, like, this is...
You're
this,
like literally in Babylon.
I literally am home. Like, I was... Because I felt like a cuckoo, right, in where I grew up in, which was white and upper middle class and burbs. You know the burbs. And everybody was, like, Catholic or... I mean, and nothing... I didn't fit in anywhere in any of this. I started smoking dope at 15. I felt a little better, but even the hippies I fucking couldn't stand because all they wanted to do was sit around and listen to the Grateful Dead and smoke dope, which is so boring. So then I encountered witchcraft and paganism. I was like, holy shit, there's actually religious stuff around what I know to be true, right? So to make a very long story short, I devoured stuff. We became good friends. And then there was a collection of other teenagers who kind of gravitated to the magical child. And we all hung out together. We're all the same age and nobody...
Talk about what that was like. What was that scene like?
It was so wonderful. I mean... So at the time, I didn't think anything of it because I just assumed there were magical childs all over the world and that every town had an occult shop and that this was happening everywhere. And then I found out, of course, no, this was like ground zero of Nagasaki for occultism, right? And we were teenagers, so we were idiots, right? So we hung around and smoked dope and talked magic and took things and there was Eddie Buzinski was more or less the sort of... It was a lot of gay people, like Eddie Buzinski and Herman Slater were lovers. They also ran more or less most of the occult stuff in town, and they ran the shop. And the good thing about that is that I never was exposed to homophobia as a kid because I'm surrounded by a bunch of like drag queens and pagans and witches and weirdos, and I just thought this is kind of normal. And they kind of were protective of us. They were sweetly protective of us, and I didn't realize it then, but now I do. And so we kept saying, we wanted, we started with Pagan Way. I don't know if you've ever heard of Pagan Way.
No, what's that?
Pagan Way is like the gateway drug for pagans. It isn't anymore, but it's a very sort of open, relaxed, non-initiatory way of learning how to cast a circle, how to invoke the gods, how to do magic. It's very sort of low level, like I guess you could call it like a Minerval. I mean, it's like the beginning.
What is it, like a correspondence course?
No. It was a thing that was all over the country.
Okay.
They were called groves, and New York had one, and there were several of them. If you go to Pantheon, you'll still meet Pagan Way people. It was like people who wanted to practice, who were remembering. A lot of us felt like we were born pagan, and we were remembering from past lives or whatever that we didn't believe in this religion that we were born into. We believed in many gods. We believed in nature. We believed in the Earth Mother, and And so it was very simple songs, simple rituals, but very potent. And so we kind of cut our teeth in that. And then we, because being teenagers, we were pushing the elders who were all doing drugs and fucking each other. It was the 70s, right? It was they were great role models unless you really were looking for good role models. And in which case, looking back, they probably weren't the best. But they were nothing but loving and protective of us, no matter who they were fucking and what other craziness was going on, right? And so we kept petitioning, saying we want to be witches. And they said, no, you're too young, you can't, blah, blah, blah. And they had, the tradition that was coming out of the workshop was called the Welsh Traditional Witchcraft. And I don't know anything about Welsh, and even now I'm not really big on it, but that's what they were doing. It was a British traditional witchcraft in competition with the Gardnerians who had landed in Long Island.
So what was like the meaningful difference?
Oh, it was a war. It was an immediate war, of course. Like every occult situation, I learned the template of how this works. So the Gardnerians came from Gerald Gardner from England. You probably know something about that. And they claimed to be the witchcraft tradition, right? And where they ended up was Long Island, like upper middle class, very well off, white culture. And we were like urban New York culture. And there were some Gardnerians there, but they were very snooty about their initiation, and you had to prove who initiated who and all this shit. We're teenagers. We didn't give a fuck. We're like who fucking cares? Well, I was begot by who begot. Oh, it's still a thing in the craft, believe me. And I'm like, whatever. But there was this war going on, and we ignored it. But anyway, they were poaching each other's coven members and stuff like this. This is like hilarious. So we pushed and pushed, and they finally said, okay, we'll create a juvenile coven, which is of course illegal as fuck on every level. And so we formed a coven, and I have photos. I'll show you photos. You can take photos of it if you want. Called the Children of Branwen, and this is all part of Celtic mythology. And the woman who was here having dinner with me last night, who is married to Robert Bartlett, the alchemist, her name is Karen. Karen was my high priestess in New York in 1971.
Oh, wow. So it had some adult supervision, or
not so much?
Not so much.
Technically yes. Every time we had a circle, there was usually a priest or priestess there who was an operative, second or third degree priestess.
Oh, interesting.
But then there were circles where they wouldn't show. It'd be like, okay, and then it was like, okay. They would say to Karen, you know the most. You know, I'm 15 or 14 and 15. She's like 15. They say, you know the most, you're the high priestess. She's like, okay. And Robert, who always knew the most, he knew more than most of the high priests. Because he sat and he just absorbed. He sat in the middle of the web, like a spider in the middle of a web at the Magical Child, and read everything. Everything. It's horrible that we're losing him, because he never wrote his stuff down, but he knew it all. And he would correct the elders. Like he'd be sitting there at 15. They'd say, okay, you need to use frankincense, myrrh, and you need to use some of that. He'd go, no, it's frankincense, myrrh, and this. And they go, no. Then they look up, they go, oh no, he's right.
I will show you.
He hand wrote his books of shadows, which we were all supposed to do, and none of us did except him. He was one of those people. So he became the high priest, and she became the high priestess, and we ran. Pretty soon we were a functioning coven without any adult supervision, and it was fantastic.
So where were you meeting?
We met at people's apartments, because a lot of people, like a lot of the teenagers that I hung out with, were emancipated. They had abusive households, or their parents didn't care.
So what were you doing? Taking the train down, like on weekends?
Yep. Yeah. Taking the what was it? The one coming out of Connecticut, the New Haven. I think it was the New Haven. 30 minutes took me right down to Grand Central. My parents thought I was visiting my grandmother, who lived at 84th and Lexington, and I would go spend Friday with her, and then I'd say, okay, I'm going to go party with my friends, and she'd be like, cool. Nice. No, my grandmother was like Auntie Mame. She was the best. She turned me on to museums. She turned me on to Japanese food. She turned me on to culture. She kept saying, please come out of the burbs so I can show you culture, because they have no clue what culture is, which was true. So then I went and hung out and did nefarious things with them. So to make a long story short, as we move forward with this, we all had to get signed permission slips from our parents to join the coven. That was the funniest moment.
How'd you pull that off?
I went up to my mom, not my dad. Yeah. I went up to mom. I said, Mom, I need you to sign this. She goes, what is it? I said, it's a permission slip. And I didn't say it wasn't from school. Yeah. And she looked at it. She goes, oh. Is it a field trip? I go, kind of. Kind of.
Like that.
And then she reads it. She goes, witchcraft? I go, we prefer to call it an alternative religion, Mom. And she was like, I go, Mom, just sign it. Just sign it. She's like, I go, you won't see me on weekends and I won't be bothering you. She's like,
signed.
So yeah. Only once she stopped me on the stairs and she goes, where are you going? I'm going back to New York. Every Friday I left and I didn't come back until late Sunday night. Fuck ride, right? Yeah. I hate New York. Sure. You know? Who cares about the burbs?
It's like another planet.
No, my dad's like, you need to join the football team. I'm like, yeah, no. I'm invoking the gods. I don't have time to join football team. But yeah, she looked at me, she goes, where are you going to hang out with your witchcraft friends? I go, I go, Mom, don't talk about things you don't understand. And she kind of backed up. It was like a horror movie. She went, and I went out, and she never mentioned it again. I was a horrible child. I really was. So long hair and out of my mind. So what happened was there was these witchcraft fights, like there always is in politics, and we were doing the work. Like we would sit and we would hang out together. And we would all sleep in the same room, and we would just hang out together and do ritual work and share and talk about occult, talk about the work. Like, I mean, we were young, we were vociferous. I mean, we absorbed everything, and then we discovered Crowley, and we got tired of the witchcraft stuff, and we didn't like doing the same rituals every single Sabbath. We created our own. We started writing our own rituals, like veering from the whole witchcraft thing. Mm-hmm. And then we discovered Crowley. Robert, of course, had everything because he worked at the Magical Child and they paid him in books. So he had walls. He literally, it's a shame we lost his library.
Funny. He sounds like he was very precocious.
Very. Over the top smart.
He probably thought he was
a little arrogant. A little arrogant. Oh no, it was really
I never really knew him. Like
yeah,
I met him. I met him when I became a member of Horizon. He was still a member at that point, I think,
mm-hmm.
and he was sort of on his way out. Like he
yeah.
was, I remember him doing a class at one point. And he was still able to talk and teach a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
He was one of the smartest people I knew. I mean, he's still alive, but it's a horrible loss. It's a horrible loss for me personally, but it's a horrible loss to the great work because, and I used to tell him this over and over again, you've got to write books.
Yeah.
You've got to your head is full of way more than I'll ever get. And you need to do something with it. And he just didn't. And now it's too late. But he was...
He got really into the Thelemic stuff, and is that how you were kind of exposed
well,
to
we used to call him Frater Tahuti, by the way, just because he was like
we
were like, okay, what does this tarot card mean? We'd all look at him. He'd go, oh, like that, right? So he had Crowley, like he had everything. So we all worked our way through Magic and Theory, like together. I mean, which when you're a teenager was kind of like, what? Like, what is this? And I don't, I had to go through it again a second time later in life to really pull a lot of it. But read his autohagiography, which was 100,000 pages. We read I read virtually all of the Equinox, and all of us did. Like we just absorbed everything because we said, okay, what are we doing? We're witches and we're magicians, and we were good at making the mojo happen. Cord magic, candle magic, whatever. We did bring, drawing down the moon, and it would come down and the whole temple would be filled with light. We had our shit. Shit was happening, right? We're like, okay, what are we doing? And then we decided, you know what? We want to stay out of the whole political thing. We're going to create our own magical group called the Grove of the Star and the Snake. Because we had found the Book of the Law. Mm-hmm. We had brought that into our circles, and we had read it ritually, and we all went, bam! Holy fuck, what's this? So to me, the Book of the Law, like other things in my life, are holy books. They're tantras. I don't think the Book of the Law is the only one. I mean, I'm primarily a pagan, but I'm a magician and a lot of things. But it is by far one of the most powerful ritual texts I've ever worked with.
What was the effect of that book on you? How would you describe
it? We had an astounding incendiary experience. Especially you get to that third chapter, it's like, whoa. But when you're a third chapter, it's like, oh, I mean, when you're a teenager, you get to that third chapter, you're like, yeah, burn it. Yeah. right. You're like, no. Remember, I'm.
A bunch of teenagers weren't clutching their pearls at the.
You got to remember too that the Vietnam War was coming to a massive head. I was a member of Socialist Workers Party and getting tear gassed in protests.
So you're talking about this is the early 1970s.
That's correct. Yeah, 70s and mid 70s, because really the Vietnam War extended almost all the way towards the end of the 70s while it's still unwound. Like the bombing of Cambodia and whatnot was like 76, 77. So we were furious, right? The whole country was furious. And there was tear gas in the streets. So, we read the Book of the Law, we're like, hell yeah.
Yeah, it's burning down.
It was. No, it made perfect sense. And then we started bringing other stuff. Like we'd bring some Native American stuff in. We got the Golden Dawn. We read that from cover to cover. We're like, let's recreate some Golden Dawn rituals. All right. So then
you talking about the Regardi book?
Yeah, the big blue one. I still have it. And we did the whole judging of the soul. We created because I had a temple in my house in Rye. Mm-hmm. My mom's place on the third floor. I just took over a room and turned it into a temple, and my parents never went further than the second floor. They had no idea what I was doing in there. Perfect place to drop acid, it was. Oh, we were doing a lot of that too. A lot of psychedelics, a lot of pot smoking. We were doing rituals combined with LSD and stuff to just experiment. We were experimenting with everything. We created the Grove of the Star and the Snake. We had our basic, what do I want to say? Our basic rule. Our motto was, if it works, use it. If it doesn't, fuck it. That was our order rule. And then we added later sink or swim. Like we're just going to dive in with it.
What did that mean?
So, for example, when Kenneth Grant's books came out, we read those and we were like, this is the shit. Yeah. Oh, the Kleepoth, let's do them. And we did. We did some amazing Kleepothic rituals. Some went awry. One I really regret. Robert brought a friend of his visited, and we were doing this path working through the Kleepoth into a particular cell of the Kleepoth. And at this point, we kind of knew what we were doing. I mean, sort of. And Robert was like, oh no, we're doing this thing. And he goes, oh, I'll sit and watch. We never should have let him sit and watch. Like, you don't do that with this stuff, right? And he ended up having a major breakdown. And
like what, right there?
No, like within a month.
So he didn't like have a bad acid trip in front of you or something? No. It wasn't like that.
No, he had severe problems and we should never. I don't know if it was causality. I don't know if it was causal, but it couldn't have helped, right? And that was a valuable lesson we learned. You know, like no newbies. You're either in the circle or you're not. You either know what you're doing or you're not. We also kicked some people out because they were porous in terms of magic. They were flippant or didn't pay attention or didn't study the rituals we were going to do, and they were, you know what I mean? Yeah. Or they were just not focused, right? They weren't committed, you know.
How big was your core group?
6 people.
That's pretty good size.
Yeah, that's enough. Like I've had several
more than that. It's hard.
Yeah, exactly. I've had several groups like that. I had a group in Bellingham called Voxus Remoti. There was 6 of us, and we did astounding stuff. That's after we got involved in the Ma'at stuff and started working with that. So I've always been eclectic. It's like I don't see any reason why I should be compartmentalize things if different things seem to work together, like art, right? Like some people say, oh, you should only paint, you should never add crayon or what, you know, if you're doing acrylic, only acrylic. I don't buy that. We didn't know any better. Like we used to be critiqued a lot by older occultists, and they'd say, you can't mix Native American blah blah blah, and we'd be like, well, that's what we did, and it worked really well. Like,
that was like your equivalent of like okay boomer.
Basically, that was my equivalent of okay boomer. And we just like we realized to stop talking to people, right? Like we're just gonna do our thing. And then we started to publish our own magazine called Mandragore, which is I put up digital copies of it. So from 79 on, we did a thelemic, magical, eclectic, what people later called chaos magic is what we were doing, right? But our own version of it, and it's very creative. And we had some serious stuff, so I'll send you a link to them. But we were for sale at Weiser's bookstore, which was the holy grail of bookstores, which was 5 minutes walk from the Magical Child, right? Which went from the Warlock Shop in Brooklyn to Spring Street in near the Village, and so that was the nexus epicenter, right? It was like we'd go back and forth between those two. So then we connected with NEMA. We started getting, because the Magical Child had everything, and we started seeing this thing, the Cincinnati Journal of Ceremonial Magic, worst title ever for a magazine.
Sure, that doesn't. It's not
Cincinnati.
Cincinnati. Doesn't inspire a whole lot.
Like, what the fuck? But Robert bought everything. Like literally, Robert bought everything or had everything. So we're reading it. We're like, oh, this is actually some pretty powerful magical stuff. They're working with mostly thelemic work and hermetic stuff. All of a sudden, in the middle of they had a group called Bait Cabal, which I still am in touch.
Called what Cabal?
Bait, B-A-T-E, which is, I guess, an old way of saying bet or Beth. The
Hebrew letter.
Yeah. So we started reading their stuff and going, oh, this is interesting. They're kind of on a similar path, eclectic path that we are of bringing Thelema and bringing magic in and taking the teachings of Crowley and working with things like, you know, Liber Resh and Liber Israfel, and we were like ritualizing all of this stuff. Like we would do a Tahuti ritual and then do like Liber Israfel, or we do a Babylon ritual and we do, you know, this. And then we started getting this stuff from Maggie, from NEMA. And this stuff was really interesting. We're like, oh, she's connecting with Ma'at, the next step in this continuum of magic. And we'll try it. And we brought it into the circle, And we ritually did it, and it was another kaboom. So
what was it? Was it like a particular ritual that you were doing that she had written?
She had a very simple ritual, which was you take a feather, and she had gotten a name, a word, ipsos, which means by the same mouth. And also she had liber pene per number. We had the first few chapters of that. So we ritually read it aloud, and we all sat around a candle, and we did it. Mm-hmm. And there was this massive, amazing influx of power that transformed all of us, and we went, holy shit. Because, we would bring in ritual after ritual after ritual. Some would be like, right? Yeah. Some would be like, oh, that's all right. It's a little twinkly. That's nice. Or, oh, that ritual got us something. But once in a while, like, Al was one and her stuff was the other. Like, those two, like, were literally like A-bomb explosions in our circle.
So what was it? I mean, how would you describe the
a huge black flame, just like visually. I'm visual and kinesthetic.
Yeah, same here.
So yeah. So like Book of Law was like flame, sure. Like flame, and it pure energizing, and not being able to sleep for like 24 hours. Ma'at was a black flame of balance and clarity and truth, and like truly getting this amazing gnosis of what truth is, like real truth, capital T, the balance of the universe, karma, the way everything is supposed to be moving, right? And when we combined the two, we found it almost like a perfect cocktail, because the Horus energy was a little wild, a little dangerous, and a little destructive, and Ma'at brought like a balance to it. Mm-hmm. And so we started working with that. That's how the Horus-Maat Lodge was founded. Our major thing was we would follow the power. Like, we were amoral. Like, whatever gave us, like, the biggest thing is where we went. Mm-hmm. And we tried this. Yeah, the Necronomicon, nothing. Yeah, a little bit, that's a little bit. But then these two things were like, okay, we're going this way. That's how the HML was founded, because we was like, all right, gin plus this equals an amazing cocktail. Yeah. So it wasn't very intellectual. So we were like the totally Horus energy, full of hormones, and we went and visited her, and she was completely very dark, very Ma'at, she was like a housewife with 3 kids in rural Ohio. I mean, she just
doing all this magic.
She looked like a dumpy housewife. I mean, I love her dearly, and I don't mean that in a bad way, because she was one of the most powerful, wonderful people in my life. But if you met her, you'd be like,
who's this?
Yeah. And
that's interesting. So so what year was it that you went out to Ohio?
79.
Okay.
And by then I was in college in upstate New York, so I was coming down and still doing work whenever I could, vacations and whatnot. And then we decided we're just going to do a road trip out to Ohio.
Oh, cool.
And we did. And we got there, and the image, we all ended up having the same image because we compared it later. And then NEMA wrote and said the exact same thing. We were like this fireball of Horus energy, like, rah! And then she's like this, like...
You're like young people in, like, what, your early 20s?
Oh, yeah.
What was your group like? Was it men and women, or was
it was. Our core, what ended up being at this point, the core group was 4 guys and a woman. Okay. But we always had women in and out, and we valued that. But that's just how it ended up. Like, we had more people come in, and then they would disappear. Like, we had questions about that. Like, we actually we learned Tarot. By the way, we also went through a phase where we all learned Tarot, and we all learned I Ching, and we basically, anything occult we absorbed. Sure. So during all this madness, and we did a lot of readings on, like, why are we the way we are? And we realized, we're like tempered steel. Like, we've been through everything. We tripped together riding the subway at 4 a.m. I mean, we went through to hell and back, sure. Right? And so nothing fazed us, like, magically. Nothing really fazed us. Shit would happen, and we'd be like, and then some people would be with us for a while, and they'd be like, no, this is too fucking weird for me. And they would, go back to witchcraft or whatever. Mm-hmm. And we were like, no, we're going all the way. We didn't even know where we were going to end up. So anyway, what the image was that we were this fireball, she was this black flame and bam, and we came together, and it was like this explosion, and we ended up doing like 4 or 5 days of ritual psychedelics. It never stopped from the minute the minute we hung out with her.
So
we went right into
ritual.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. We did everything.
Was she older than the rest?
She was older than us, yeah. But she on acid, she was like this beautiful goddess, a lit up person. So we started doing this. We didn't even know what we started doing this ritual work, and we all came together in this moment in the middle of this, like something is being born here, and we felt like the Mesla from Kether, like we all didn't have a choice in this. Like we had to create something out of this. We couldn't just come together, party, and leave. And that's the Horus-Maat Lodge was founded with that. And she went into on the final night, we did this big ritual. She went into the temple, which was in her barn, and started drumming and invoking Ma'at. And we went out into the fields and invoked Horus, like with everything we knew. And it was like raining, just a little bit of raining, but we didn't care. And then we got the image, exactly, the inverted, from Crowley, the inverted triangle of red as Horus, and the black feather in the middle. And we came up with this. All of a sudden this stuff just started to pour through. And again, if you've heard me talk about it, at some point I'm going to give a full lecture. I did it at Pantheacon. The whole point is that we're trying to get to an optimal future where we do not extinguish ourselves as a species. Mm-hmm. Like the great work, we realized the truly great work we were involved in at that moment was the survival of the human species. And that's what the great work is. And that there was no guarantee we were going to make it through the Ann of Horus. Like the Ann of Horus was going to be force and fire and destruction, and we might not make it. But if we could connect with the quote unquote quantum possibility future of Ma'at, if we could inject balance into this fiery, crazy energy, we could survive. She had made connection with an entity called Natan, who was the collected human consciousness of species consciousness. In the future, we won't need language anymore. We will be telepathic. We will understand the truth of every Buddhist and Tantric saint that says we are all one, right? We're all one consciousness. And when I hurt you, I hurt myself. Like all the saints say this, Christian, all of them say this, you know. But there's going to be a point in the future where if we make it, it'll be real. Like we will not hurt each other, because then we will be hurting ourselves. We are all one thing, right? And I mean, all the religions say this. I mean, I went in Egypt, and the Muslim church, the Muslim mosques had God is one, right? I mean, it's kind of the obvious. So there's a future point. Teilhard de Chardin called it the Omega point.
Omega point,
right? Where human consciousness will become unified, and she made contact with that, and it came through her, and we experienced it. We were like, oh, you know, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about the moment. And then so then it was like, well, what are you going to do? All right, we're going to create this lodge. I don't know what it is. I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know how we're going to do it. But we're going to create a way that we can help make sure that humanity survives. And that, to me, and that is the most thelemic thing we could do, is to do our will and help humanity as a whole do its will, which is to evolve to something better and more powerful. So that was how that came about. And then you know, the next day it was kind of like, holy fuck, what the fuck are we doing? Okay, we created a lodge, all right, so what? And then afterwards, you come back to human consciousness, you know, you're like, well, that was fun, right? It's like it's like spring break in Florida or something. Like, I don't remember what happened, but it was great, right? Then we went back and she did her thing. Then stuff started to happen. Like she and us created, we had started this idea. We created a charter, and we all signed it. We did all this stuff, and then okay, there was no internet. Then we're like, okay, whatever happens. Well, people started to be attracted. The next day, I'm going too fast in the future. The next day after we did this, after we earthed this, and we really felt it. And now when I read about how the Golden Dawn was founded by this thing, I really feel like we experienced that. Like, this wasn't us. I don't even in human consciousness, I can't really talk about it because I don't really understand, but this thing happened. And we were sort of guardians of it, and we were like, you know, we're like, fuck, we're in our 20s, you know, like, what the fuck? And so people started to come, like the next day.
This is like after you went back to New York?
No, but I went ahead too far. Like right after the night where we founded the lodge, like the next day, several people were knocking on her door going, what happened here? We want in, and it was the other members of Beit Kabal. So they were. So we had come up with a very vague, very simple initiation ritual, the Horus-Maat Lodge, which takes 5 minutes. Anybody can do it, and they can do it themselves. It's just like connecting yourself to this idea. And they were the first people to initiate it. They founded Black Moon Press, whose books you see all over now, and then this just started happening. Like people started being attracted. And I was hanging out with OTO people and Thelemic people, and they were fascinated. They said, that's interesting. So I said, this doesn't in any way denigrate or take away from Crowley in the Book of the Law. This is just like, okay, what do we do with it? You know, like there's lots of things you can do with it. This is one thing that we can do. And and Crowley talks a lot about Ma'at. He doesn't go back further.
I was about to say, like, there's a lot of that in his writings already. Like Ma'at is a very important figure to him, and especially when he talks about the adjustment card. I think one of the interesting things he says is that he talks about adjustment being the complement to the Fool, right? Because both of them have to do with stasis.
That actually makes so much sense, and I didn't remember that, and that actually fits perfectly.
Because the Fool is 0. And then adjustment is basically the manifest universe, but that's also covertly 0. Like it manifests as 2,
right?
But it's actually 0.
It makes perfect sense because Thelema in action to me is the Fool. I mean, that is the discovery of will and love and moving forward. And Ma'at is the non. It's not even deity form. It's just the inherent balance of the cosmos. And
Crowley talks about it in terms of karma, but not from a moral point of view in terms of like, you know, you do this thing, you're going to get a bad consequence, but just more like action and reaction.
I agree with him, but I've had conversations where people were like, I don't believe in karma. I'm like, you don't have to believe in karma to believe in balance and justice and truth. Yeah. You know, and
I mean, he separates it from the notion of justice. He doesn't like that's why he changes the name.
I see.
Because justice has that moral connotation of there's a moral arc of the universe, and
I prefer balance.
He laughs at that kind of stuff.
I prefer balance and truth.
That's precious.
Yeah, it is. Well, he's got a point. He often had a point. Yeah. He was one of, if not the most influential magical people that I absorbed.
But it seems like the way that this impacted you and your group was, I mean, you felt a sense of mission, it sounds like.
Yes, still do. And a lot of the things that she saw and a lot of the things that Crowley saw are happening. I mean, the global warming, I mean, how Horus is that, right? And the destruction of the planet, the destruction of nature is an excessive force and fire. I mean, the stuff that's happening.
So you see, like, global capitalism as being the expression of Horus? Is that what you're saying?
To a certain degree. Not an expression, but a side effect. I think a lot of this stuff is, we have to go through a major transformation. I've been studying the Book of Law since I was, I don't know, for 40-something years I've been studying the Book of Law. Every time I peel away...
You're not supposed to do that, you know that, right?
I understand that. I know. And you know what? How many times have I been told you're not supposed to do that? I mean, even from when we were 14, our coven people, the high priest and priestess would come and go, you're not supposed to do that.
Okay, boomer.
We'd be like, yeah, okay.
Every generation.
Okay, yeah. And that's very Horus, right? It's like, okay. All right, I won't.
And of course, I'm being sarcastic.
I know.
I don't give a fuck.
Of course you don't. And that's Horus, right? That's what I like about Horus. So, you know, I think everyone needs to do what they want to do, but we were in a particular place and time and nexus to be handed a mission, and we knew in that situation, magically, physically, emotionally, we could not say no. Now, many people have peeled off.
That's what happened to Crowley himself.
Correct.
A lot of spiritual things.
And it's happened to me personally when the great god Pan actually spoke to me, and I had to dictate it, and I was very against it, and I was like, look, I'm not a prophet. I don't want to do this, and the god Pan would not leave me be. He said, this has to be written, and so the book of Gate called Pan. I wrote it, and I was like, okay. It took me 3 years because each channeling session was really traumatic and intense. And once I got it done, I said, okay, fine, I'm done.
Now, how did that book come to be?
Yeah. So this is a sidebar of all that. When I was 15, I was always a child of nature. Like if you left me alone, I was in a tree, or I was a feral thing. And I started probably like you, like a lot of people. When I was a little kid, I started reading mythology books, like the Da'ar book of Greek mythology, or whatever his name is, Debar.
I know the book you're talking about. I have that book.
Every pagan. I
can't say his. I can't say the name either.
Every pagan and magician I know has that book.
Because I stole it from the library when I was 8.
I read it in the library. I read it in the library when I was 7 and 8.
I love that.
And finally made my mom get me one. And I bought myself a copy, and I bought my son a copy, and I made him go through it too.
Is it still in print?
Yeah.
Wow.
They just reprinted it. All new colors. It's really cool.
Wow.
Same old style, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I became enthralled with the Greek gods. And then they also do a Norse one, by the way. The same author did a Norse one. It's really excellent. Yeah, you want to see it. And that, I got enthralled with that. And then I just started absorbing all this stuff. So the god that always struck me as being the one that I was like, huh. Like, oh, I like Apollo. Oh, I look, Zeus is a dick, right? He's always been a dick. And this guy who lives in a cave with hooves, like that's my guy. Mm-hmm. Like that's me. And I don't know. I don't even think about it. And then I got into witchcraft, and then it's the horn god is a big part of that. I'm like, oh, here we go again. So I've been doing devotion to Pan since I was like a little kid. Mm-hmm. And then when I was 15, I got my mom, my poor mom, I got my mom to drive me to the Appalachian Trail and drop me off, and then pick me up like 5 days later.
Wow. How old are you?
15.
Wow.
I just said, do this. I need to do this. And it was the 70s. It was like, oh, okay, dear, like now, no way, right?
Backpacking for 5 days is pretty big deal.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know what I was doing, obviously. Sure. Nothing I had was right. And, I ran out of food.
Your mom's like, all right, Denny, go play.
Yeah, that's right. So the shit I did, I swear to God. Oh my God. Some of the things I did as a kid, I'm just like driving my Stingray off a cliff into a pile of leaves. What was I thinking, right? Anyway, it's the same thing. What was I thinking? So I started doing this. I started hiking the Appalachian Trail, and all of a sudden realizing, fuck, I'm 50 and I'm alone. I don't know what I'm doing. I have a backpack. And luckily it didn't rain because I had a tent that didn't work and all this. But my first night in like the wilderness, I woke up terrified, like utterly speechlessly terrified, like pure panic. And I just woke up like this fear overcame me utterly.
You're in the dark and by yourself.
But it was something. It wasn't just like I was okay with the woods. I was like, there was something else.
Oh, interesting.
And then I heard this, and I looked up, and Pan was standing there, and I painted it. I have the painting in my room as a black shadow filled with stars. I can't explain it, but I knew who it was, and I was like, I felt this wave of pure panic wash through me. And I mean, I literally thought I was going to shit in my sleeping bag. And it flowed through me. Yeah. And then I was in this state, like a transcendent state of bliss. And Pam was just sort of looking at me and basically like, you're one of mine. That's it. Like, just like that. No words or anything, but just like that. And then, I had a sexual experience, and I was, afterwards, I was like, what the fuck just happened, right? So the rest of the hiking trip, I would camp. I camped raw. Like I didn't even bother putting up my tent. And I would camp in a clearing. And like one day I woke up like at dawn, and I heard something, and I sat up, and there was a deer and a buck and a fawn right as far as you are from me now. I sat up. And I went, and it went,
and they were like,
and we looked,
exactly.
And I'm naked, right? And I'm just sort of squat there like, I'm completely naked. I'm fine. And they took a look at me and they just...
What, were we like laying naked in the field or what?
No, I was in my sleeping bag.
Oh.
that was at some point probably. But I just sat, like I squatted there and I just hung out for about 2 hours and they just grazed around me. And that was like one of the most transcendent religious experiences I've ever had. And it was just gorgeous and beautiful and powerful and nonverbal. And so like the rest of my trip was downloading this, like, I am part of nature. I am not separate from this. This is who I am. And then my mom picked me up. I don't know how that worked out. I'm still trying to remember how that happened. Like I said, I'll be here in 5 days. Come pick me up. And I was, and she did. So then I went back to regular reality, which never was very regular. And then was doing my ritual work with my group and all that. So I kind of like put that to the side. Like, okay, that's a personal gnosis that I've had. But he's never left me, like he, she, it has never left me. And so periodically over the last, I don't know, so what, I was 15, so I'm really old now. So over the past like 40 something years, I would occasionally get this scratch to like get the fuck out of Dodge. And even when I was married, I'd say, I would tell her I need to go hiking like once or twice a year. And she hated hiking, which was a warning sign right there. So she'd go, well, you can go by yourself. I'd be like, oh, yes, score. So but 2 or 3 times a year, I would go hiking somewhere deep and I would do pan work and do pan rituals and started keeping books. I had maybe 5 to 10 books of rituals and things and all that. And then before I got married, actually, in 81, the first one was was it San Juan Island? No, I was working with juvenile delinquents at a group home, and we took them all to Shai Shai Beach and Ruby Beach and all that, right? And I went off hiking by myself for several hours and found a cave underneath a sea stag. And I went in there to just kind of chill and meditate. And the voice of Pan came into my head and scared the living shit out of me and said, you need to write this down. And I was like, well, you don't say no, right? I mean, so I took out my book and I'm in the dark, right? And it just says, it just flowed through me, and I have no idea what I'm writing. I'm just writing it out. And then I get to the end, and the whole time I'm like shaking, like it was too much. It was too much. Like I was worried I was going to have a heart attack. And then all of a sudden it said, okay, that's enough. That's chapter 1. I'll be back. Gone. And I'm like sweating, and I'm like freaked out. So I go back and I'm like, and I look at what I wrote. I'm like, what is this? I have no fucking idea what this is. All right, fine. So I typed it, and it's in my book, and I have it. It's online. Sacred Text has it online. Oh. Yeah, I'm on a few websites. If you type in the Book of Gate, called Pen, you'll find it. And I was like, well, that was weird. Okay, went back to juvenile delinquent kids. What am I going to do? Okay. Then I went to New York. This is. I was dating but not married. I flew to New York and hung out there with Robert at his house. He had to go to work. I'm in Brooklyn Heights in his house, in his occult room in his temple, looking at books. And all of a sudden, a huge, those thunderstorms, East Coast thunderstorms. Fucking, I miss them. They're so awesome. One hit, and right overhead, and lightning started hitting the building, and the whole building is shaking, right? Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, he comes back. He's like, write this down. I'm like, I almost go, we're in fucking New York. Like, what the fuck, dude?
You don't do this in New York.
so I go through the same thing, and I write it. Great
response.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, what? This is like,
this in New York.
This is like, what the fuck?
Brooklyn,
it's not even. It's Brooklyn.
We're in Brooklyn.
It's not even Manhattan, right? It went through my mind. I was like, dude, I should be in Central Park. Like, what the fuck? So I do the same things happening. Again, I have no choice. I'm totally being manipulated. All right, whoosh, gone. I'm like, what the fuck? And I'm like, is this gonna help? Like, is this like do I have petit mal? I mean, do I have like a neurological issue going on here? Like, how long is this gonna go on? The last one was I said, okay, I need to put an end to this because it was like I knew there was a third thing. I knew there was one more chapter.
They always come in threes.
Yeah, it was right. What the fuck is up with that? It always comes in threes. Like, on maybe another planet it's always fours. I don't know, but it's always threes, right? And so I was like, okay, I need to put an end to this because I this is like hanging over me and like there's electrical stuff around me with this, and I want done with it. Like it was debilitating. So I went to San Juan Islands and I said, I'm just going to do a magical retreat. And at that point I was engaged, I believe. At least we were cohabitating. And I said, I need to do a magical retreat. That was part of the deal, and she got it. Like I said, sometimes I need just to get the fuck out and do a magical retreat. That's how it is. And she was into some of it, but not that much. But she knew, like, this is my fucking life. Sure, this is what I'm going to do, right? So I went to the San Juans, and I went to Odelay Beach, and I found it, and I was like, I was sitting there just meditating, like, okay, where will I go next? Maybe I'll go to the Orcas. And all of a sudden, an otter. Now, otters have been around my life a lot. They show up at key moments in my life. Otters.
Okay. Sure.
So my spirit animal, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Many times in my life, like one time I was really, really depressed down at the beach down over here. A sea otter came up, and I was sitting there just like utterly despondent. A sea otter came up, looked at me. I looked at it. It went back in the water and it swam along the beach and waited for me to walk. I walked with this fucking otter the whole length of the beach. And then I sat down and meditated.
Come back to us,
it gets back. No one will believe this shit. And then I know I sound like I'm fucking psychotic, right? And the otter, then I sat down.
Come back to our sea kingdom.
I sat down and I'm like, okay, goodbye, otter. The otter goes out, gets a fish, comes in front of me, sits down and eats the fish and meditates with me, right? So anyway, this all started, this is a pan thing. This whole thing started, I'm sitting on San Juan Island. No, not San Juan, Lopez Island. And I'm sitting there meditating. All of a sudden an otter comes out, jumps on the log this close to me, sits down and looks at me. And I'm like, hello. And at that moment, and like all of a sudden it does this thing with its eyes, and all of a sudden the voice of Pan comes out like, write this down. And it sat there staring at me. I'm like, yes, otter god, I'm like, so, okay, Pan, you're creeping me out now. And I did. I just it just flowed through me. I had no choice. I just went. I'm not even looking at the page, right? It's just flowing through me, and then it comes to the end, and the very end is the pipes of Pan echo out over the end of all, blah blah blah, and I'm dropping it and this whole wave comes off me like, oh fuck, I'm done with this. And I look at the otter.
And then another otter comes up out of the water. That's not so fast.
the otter looks at me and it's like, basically it goes, cheerio, and just turns around and hops back in the water and goes away. And that was that. So I have had many encounters. I've done lots of work with Pan, but I've never had direct gnosis. I've never had and I'm glad, because I think I'd be dead. Honestly, it's weird and freaky. And I try to tell people this, and they think I'm fucking nuts, or that I'm trying to be Aleister Crowley or something. And I'm like, no, this is how it happened. This is what it is. God Pan wanted me to help revive his cult.
Crowley had eyewaws. He didn't have.
He didn't have eyewaws.
He didn't have the otter connection.
That's it. If he had an otter, I don't know what would his animal have been. That must have been pretty funny. Maybe an ibis or something more regal, or a peacock.
Be something like that.
Hey, if you're finding what Denny has to say interesting, don't forget to check out his website at dennysargentauthor.com. Now let's get back to the interview.
So yeah, how'd you end up out here? Let's get that part of the story.
So I went to upstate New York and got my degree in history and education, and came back down to New York and hung out for quite a while, and realized that I didn't want to get sucked into New York City, because once you're there, you never leave. And a bunch of my friends were there.
New York is such an intense place.
It is, and once you become a New Yorker, you don't fit anywhere else, right? And I knew this, and I watched you eat up my dad, and loved it. So I had friends who were out here, and I had always kind of had a fantasy of Oregon and Washington, even though I'd never been out here. I read all the hippie magazines and stuff. Mm-hmm. And a friend sent me in February where there was 5 feet of snow on the ground, and I was trying to decide what to do, and a friend of mine sent me a letter, because that's all we had, right? And I opened it, a bunch of flowers fell out. It was February.
Yeah.
Here's my friend Denny. He goes, yeah, this is Washington. The flowers are blooming. And I was like, I'm fucking out of here.
That's exactly.
I'm going there. And he's like, I'll put you up and come on out. And I'm like, okay, now I have to find money. So I decided to get my master's degree. And at the time, again, there was no internet or anything, but I just sent letters, my resumes and letters to several Washington State universities, including Western. And Western accepted me sight unseen for a full tuition, everything, teaching assistantship. So I was a teaching assistant there for 3 years, and it paid for everything. I mean, I lived like a millennial lifestyle. Like I lived poor, but I had a great time. So that's how I ended up out here. And I really liked Bellingham because it was like, talk about Pan. I mean, it was like it's a gorgeous, Bellingham was a gorgeous place and lots of woods. And
this area of the country.
This area is the most beautiful area of the country, period. I've traveled all over the United States. This is still
I thought that when I moved out here, because I drove out here.
Did you?
And I went through like whatever it was, like 8 or 9 states, and I was blown away coming through the mountain pass. I couldn't believe that. So, I had seen pictures of it before coming out here, and I was like, "What do you like live in a movie or something?"
Yeah, right.
It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
And then I moved out here, and I was like, "This is just insane." It does feel more magical. It actually does.
They never tell you about the winters, but once you.
Well, I mean, you came from like whatever it was, like 7 feet of snow.
That's right. That's right.
To flowers in February, so.
And I lived in upstate New York, which was worse. So that was the end of that. I thought about New England, but. We drove across. Me and a friend of mine drove across country too. He inherited his father's like baby blue Cadillac, and we put everything I owned in it, and we, took a couple of ounces of pot, and we drove the entire country. And he pulled a really fast one on me that you will find very funny. We get to Washington State. We're in Eastern Washington. He goes, "You're in Washington." I look around and go, "What the fuck?"
Yeah.
He goes, "No, this is Eastern. This is Washington." Like he totally conned me. I go, "No, where's all the trees and stuff?" He goes, "Oh no, that's." And I was like, "Oh my god!" And then we go up and over the mountains. I'm like, "Holy shit!" And he drives me right to the foot of Mount Rainier. He goes, "Now you're in Washington." Yeah. And that was fantastic. So actually, I got Robert to move out here, and several members of the Grove moved out here too. Eric and Robert and Jillian came out, and she didn't stay. But so yeah, I love it out here. And I knew this is where I wanted to be. I love it here. I'm never gonna leave it. This is the most vital. I mean, in terms of like gods like Pan and nature gods, this is you hike into the mountains here and you're there. Like the gods are still there. So the other thing that happened, like there's several branches in my life. And all the books I write come out of things I feel like writing about. So a lot of people give me grief and say, you don't have any pattern to your books. And each one is an obsession that I've had. So the one I'm working on right now is on Tantra, which I've been working on for, I don't know, since 1980 in my head. Mm-hmm. Several members of the Grove went to England and they met a guru there called Lokanath. Lokanath had received a direct, real initiation in a surviving tantric lineage, mm-hmm. which was called, at the time, that was called the Adinath Sampradaya, or lineage. And they brought it back to New York, and they said to me, do you want this initiation? You're very devout to the gods, and you already work with, we had already done stuff with Shiva and Kali and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh yeah, sure.
You're like, whatever, I'll take it.
I am a ritual whore. I really am. And people are like, you want to do this really dangerous, crazy ritual? I'm like, yes. Yes, I am. No, I will try anything. I'm one of those. Crowley and I have that in common. It's like, yeah, bring it on. Let's try it. Let's see if I don't die, then that's good. And if I do die, well, I was supposed to go. So I took the initiation, was not expecting that much, having done a few, but it completely blew my mind. I had a major transcendental download experience, which I've never had before. I've been, at that time I was in Kenneth Grant's OTO, and I had taken initiations and other things, and I had been initiated in Wicca. I had gone through 3 degrees. I'd had some very powerful initiatory experiences, This was not like anything else. This
What was Kenneth Grant's OTO like?
It was awesome.
I don't know anything about
Do you want me to sidebar on that one before I talk to Tantra? Because Tantra's going to be a real straight shot, right? Because there's nothing that... No. Kenneth Grant's OTO was so fun because it's not a fraternal order, right? It wasn't. It was a magical order. It was really... I shouldn't be saying this, but it was closer to the AA. In terms, if you line up, I have the curriculum of the A, right? If you line up, it wasn't so different. But Kenneth was nuts, right? Like, I mean, he was awesome, cool, but he had a visionary way of looking at things. Each of his, like, people totally don't understand his books. Hush, get over here.
I think he saw somebody.
How dare they walk on the street?
And therefore he has to bark. Hey, Faunus!
Faunus, come here! Faunus! Get over here!
Hey, boy.
Get over here! Sit down and shut up.
Come here. Be good.
Stop. Sit. You scared them away, they're gone.
Don't touch my butt. Animal. So yeah, I don't know anything about Kenneth Grant's OTO at all.
So I'll tell you how we
like
discover...
people know about Tantra. They have like an idea of what Tantra is, but like when you say Kenneth Grant's OTO, like that's really...
All right, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the story. So again, we hung out at the Warlock shop. Then it was the Magical Child. We literally hung out there. And the coolest thing about the Magical Child was every occultist in the universe came through there. I had no idea, but now I look back and realize, like, Anton LaVey came in with a cape and his whole thing, and anybody you can think of came in, Buckland and all the authors. And so I became very jaded. I sat behind the counter with Robert, and he dispensed things, and I was like, wow, that's so-and-so, that's so-and-so. Anyway, so the load of Kenneth Grant, like the first Kenneth Grants came in, and the first one was, I believe... not Cults of the Shadow, and it wasn't Aleister Crowley and the Hidden Gun. It was the Occult Revival, which I highly recommend. The first thing I recommend to everybody, because they're really good books, and it was before he really went la la land. But we read it. It was like, holy shit, this is the best book on Thelema and Crowley and magic that we'd ever read, and well put together and a little wiggy, but that's okay. And Aleister Crowley and the Hidden God, I still think is one of the best books about Thelema and Crowley that I've ever read. In Cults of the Shadow, he started to go into Spare. He spent a lot of time going to Spare and that, which I didn't know. And Robert had all the Spare, and I became a huge devotee fanboy of Spare. In fact, I feel stronger about Spare than even Crowley. Mm. I think Spare got right to the root of magic in a visual, kinesthetic way that worked for me even better than a lot of other stuff.
Yeah, he had like a more intuitive, less sort of systematic approach. That was like, I don't think he really had like a conflict necessarily with Crowley, but he didn't stay in AA that long.
That's right. Well, there's a whole school of thought that they worked together for a period of time.
Well, like a short period of time. He was at the beginning of AA.
Yeah, and there's a school of thought that Crowley seduced him.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
And that was there's a few interesting historically put together articles about that. And at that point, Crowley was pretty much seducing whoever he could seduce, and they were both powerful people. And he made some comments, some cryptic comments about his regret at the way things had gone with Spare.
Oh, interesting.
And Spare was kind of naive in that way. Anyway, so Kenneth Grant is like taking these things and making them comprehensible and making them permeable, like here's how occultism began in this way, and here's your entryway into it. And we were like, wow, this was right where we were, and it was perfect. Mm-hmm. And then he introduced like Cults of the Shadow and Night Side of Eden, and Outside the Circles of Time, which was his really out there stuff. But he introduced us to the Kleepoth, and then I went back to Crowley and found Liber 231, and started looking at the cells of the Kleepoth and realizing like, this is really powerful stuff. Like the Tree of Life is all very kind of white light, but it makes sense. And at that point, I was deeply into Carl Jung and deeply into the shadow side, and like it makes sense that every sphere would have a quote unquote shadow side to it. Mm. And we started working with it, and that's just really powerful stuff, especially psychologically, like working through issues of fear or paranoia, or when working through blocks. Mm-hmm. So we were kind of into it. Then we found out that like NEMA was corresponding with him.
Okay.
So we started corresponding with him. We didn't know. We corresponded with everybody.
Sure.
We were Victor Anderson. He sent us a book, and like we were just these kids. We just wrote letters to everybody, and in that era, people often responded who you would expect to. I am 14 and I'm really into this, and they went back and go, oh, good. Paul Hewson, Mastering Witchcraft, a seminal book that everybody had. But he wrote back. He's now got a Facebook page. So Kenneth Grant wrote back and forth, and then we started to have a conversation about this and about what he was doing, and we were in this very experimental, like let's flow with let's integrate everything, and he was fine with that, and he wasn't bossy. There was nothing to it really. Like there was nothing restrictive. I was assigned a superior in the order, and I had to do. It was very AA. I had to do a practice for a year and submit my.
Now, where was your superior in the U.S. or? He
was in upstate New York.
Okay.
And at that time I was going to college, so I did something very simple. I think what I did was I did the chakras every day. And I would go up and down the chakras every day, and then I would write my experiences and my visions, and then I compiled the whole thing and send it to him, and then he would review it and look at it, and we would have a conversation back and forth, and then I would.
You weren't going to like any Kenneth Grant OTO potlucks or any shit like that.
Not then, but it gets better.
We're getting there.
It gets better.
But right now, what you're describing sounds like an AA.
It's almost the same. Sure. I mean, I shouldn't say that, but like the second degree was doing basically bhakti yoga. Pick a deity and do bhakti yoga to. And I was in college and I did Nephthys, the wife of Set. I don't know why I did that. I look back, it was probably not the smartest thing to do, but it was really powerful, and it worked me through a number of things. And so I became friends with my superior, who was at that time called Frater PVN. He later changed his name to Alabar. And he started having gatherings in upstate New York near Binghamton, Cornell. Sure. He had a farm, and he started having these Thelemic get-togethers. And that's where I got to meet a lot of people who were in Grant's OTO or who were peripheral Thelemites, fringe like they were Thelemites.
That's really interesting. So, okay, like who in Binghamton, New York is in like the late 70s is into Kenneth Grant?
I know,
like, what was the group like? Tell me.
It was wonderful. It was like a rave. It was like a fucking rave. It was like if you've ever been to like a party where everyone's a freak. It was like that.
Because there's like probably barely any like what would you call it? Like Crowley OTO and Binghamton, New York.
No, there was the Binghamton the we called it the California OTO then because there was several. There was the Moda, right? But the people who were connected with the OTO that we're members of now.
Those are the California.
Right.
Yeah.
They many of them were also in Grant's OTO.
Okay.
There was no issue. Things were much looser then, and even when Jimenez Alpha came, and he ran. The OTO chapter was run out of the Magical Child. Mm-hmm. So Herman Slater was actually, which was hilarious. He was head of the what was it called? It was an oasis, and it was called the Earth Star Oasis of the OTO. And I met several times. I met Jimenez Alpha, great, right?
Great.
And we would talk, and we were these crazy kids, right? And we're talking Thelema to him, like, yeah, Thelema's the shit, man. And he was totally great with us. Yeah. He was the sweetest guy. I mean, he was fucked up. We were all fucked up. I got him high, and he was like, "Oh, you got some weed?" I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Okay, you're the OHO. This is gonna work for me, And we said, no, we're in Kenneth Grant's OTO, or we're at that time we were approaching it. And he was like, "Oh, that's cool." And we talked Thelema, and we said we have a very different view of Thelema. It's very open, and he was very open. He was like, as long as people are doing their will and love, like everybody. The whole point is everybody does their own will the way they need to do it. And we were totally in agreement with him. We were like, yeah, he was awesome. So there were people there. I don't know. I don't want to name. I shouldn't name names. There was a bunch of people there who you would know the name of in the occult world. who were there at these parties. A lot of them came up from New York or Boston.
I can neither confirm nor deny whether
Yeah,
they
right. and then they handed out Molly. so then it got really interesting, right? So there was probably, I don't know, 40 people there. And the head of Kenneth Grant's OTO was there, and her name was Sora Tanit. And I thought it was really forward-thinking of him and very brilliant that he made the head of of his OTO in the United States a woman. Mm-hmm. And he was strongly influenced by Tantra. And just to bring it back for a minute to Tantra, the initiation that came from Sri Gurudev Dadaji Mahendranath, the Adinath Sampradaya, to London, Kenneth Grant's main right-hand person was the person who initially received the initiation. So if you read Kenneth Grant's books about Tantra, he actually hits a lot of secret things that are real because he had access to the lineage that I'm in. There was a big falling out between the two of them because he wanted more of the lineage, and the lineage holder said, "No, you can't. It doesn't work, Kenneth. You can't take that, you know." But he took things like the kalas, and there's a number of things. He talks about the Vama mark. He drops a lot of stuff that's involved in the tantric lineage that was there. So everything. I mean, it was the age where everything kind of came together, right? Everybody. You'd meet people at these gatherings, and they were involved in 3 different cults you were involved in, and it was just like normal and fun, and everybody was
So Denny, what is Tantra?
All right.
Explain to me what Tantra is, because this is a word that's thrown around a lot.
Correct.
And whenever I go and start to read into Tantra and what it is, it's actually a much more complicated picture.
It's way more complicated.
So complicated, in fact, that I tend to put it aside.
Okay. So, Tantra.
How do you see the essence of it? Explain it to me.
I'm in it because I'm now finally, after years, I'm trying to write a book about it, because I've halted many times because of this exact question. Tantra means weave.
Right.
It has 2 meanings. It means to weave, or it means a book, essentially a book of magic, which is a Tantra.
It's based on what it was written on. Eventually, is what I
right.
Like the suttas, like a sutta, I forget. I think it means scroll or something, and because they were written on these scrolls, and then.
So I start with that. It means to weave. All right. So what's the point? Let's let that sit for a second and go back to the origin. I just read an article. Finally, I found this article. The oldest religious surviving physical things are found in Mohenjo-daro in India. Are found in Mohenjo-daro, the Harappan culture.
Yeah.
That's the oldest. They identified 2 deities. Finally found this survey that identified 2 deities. Because my goal is to go back to the roots. Because Hinduism is not Tantra. Hinduism is an outgrowth of the primitive, primal pagan religion of the Indian subculture, right? So, and the roots of that were in several places. Nepal. The earliest is Mohenjo-daro, which is now in part of Pakistan, and then and I'm going somewhere with this, and then where Tantra is really huge now is in the Bengal area. So there's several areas where this indigenous, primal, powerful, magical, religious tradition has managed to survive, and then Hinduism is kind of the Protestantizing of the whole thing. So there were 2 deity forms. One was a horned Shiva, which I have an image of the seal, the cylinder seal. The other they identify as Durga, a goddess associated with lions. So Tantra, if anything, starts with Shiva and Shakti, with the god and goddess, in whatever primal form. And the Shiva ling, which is clearly phallic with a yoni base, is the most primordial symbol of Tantra and is always present in every tantric ritual. So it really boils down to, what is Tantra? It is the first religion of recognizing the powers of creativity, of fecundity, of the uniting of opposites. 2 equals 0 to me is like, sums up Tantra beautifully. Mm-hmm. And so people veer towards sex because they see, a Shiva ling or man and woman. It's like sex is part of Tantra, but it absolutely isn't the core of Tantra. Tantra is about life. Mm-hmm. So, and I know I can have this conversation with some people that understand words like samsara and maya and whatnot. So Buddhism, which I've taken refuge in Tibetan Buddhism. I have nothing to argue with Buddhism, right? But Buddhism says, okay, what you want to do is you want to kind of push all that away and transcend Maya and achieve your own liberation through hard work and meditation.
I mean, that's like Theravada.
Theravada. Yeah. And Mahayana. I'm more Mahayana. It's definitely.
There's a lot of different Buddhisms.
Yeah.
Might not.
But the four basic truths, and the eightfold path is pretty much. Mm-hmm. So there's nothing wrong, and it's real. It's right. Tantra, in a way, is the opposite side of that, which is instead of.
It's not renunciate.
It's not renunciate. It's embraciate. The idea of Tantra is. And the fact it's Vama-marg or left-hand path, the fact that it's immersing yourself in Maya. Like instead of standing back and observing Maya and detaching from Maya so you are not affected, you're not being pulled hither and yon all the time. You're in the center of the wheel, which I think is an important thing to do. Tantra is like embracing embracing samsara, embracing Maya, and being involved fully 100% in the sensuous and sensory experience of your life, and that becomes the basis of liberation. So both sort of ideas end up with liberation. The more dangerous one is Tantra because it's easy to fall off. Like Crowley, he tried to go that way. A lot of people go that way. But doing drugs and doing lots of sex magic and doing lots of sex and embracing all of the sensory things, it's very distractible. And you have to, the key to Tantra is all of it is dedicated to the guru, which is your holy guardian angel. Guru means light. It basically means the light is there and it's removing darkness from light is what guru means. And we say it as a spiritual teacher is a guru, but really the guru is your Atman, is your holy guardian spirit. So it's embracing all these things, but understanding and devoting yourself to the fact that every single thing that I do, whether I have sex with this person or do this drug or whatever, it's all for the divine. It is all part of the divine. It's all part of liberation.
That's my interpretation of Thelema.
Yes, me too.
That's my interpretation.
Yes, which is why I never had an issue with Thelema and Tantra, because to me, and this is where I get heretical, to me, the Book of the Law is a Tantra. And I have...
What does that mean to you?
It means it's... Okay. Tantras are generally written as conversations between the god and goddess. Either the goddess saying, Shakti or Parvati, or let me tell you this truth. And the goddess says, oh, please explain to me the nature of the universe, right? Or it's the other way around. That's more or less the pattern of the Book of the Law. Nuit says, let me tell you. And then Hadith says, let me tell you. And then there's sort of conversations between them. And then Horus comes in and goes, let me tell you. But so it's dialogues with divinity that teach you underlying principles of the philosophy and physics of our reality. Mm-hmm. So when I read the Kali Tantra or the Tadala Tantra or the Book of the Law, like to me, they resonate the same. Like there's an underlying matrix to each of those that's important and powerful. And Tantra, all the old Tantras are old, but the underlying pattern, energetic pattern underlying them resonates very well with the Book of the Law. And to me, and other transmitted documents that have these vibratory matrices that you have, when you peel it all away, like, what's the key to, how does this help me achieve liberation, mm-hmm. right? So I like stuff. I like gods and goddesses and colors. I'm a terrible Zen Buddhist. I tried, like I could probably survive Vipassana, but it would probably be just about the death of me. Yes. I'm not an austere person. You're more that way, and I appreciate people like that. And I hung out with people.
I've embraced a very different... I mean, that was originally the path that I was following, but I found ultimately that I needed something more balanced than that.
You are good at that, though, and I know people who are fine with reductionist and sort of clear space spirituality.
It's algorithmic is how I would think of
nice.
Vipassana. So sensation arises, don't grasp it, observe it, right? You frame it a certain way in terms of its impermanence, understand it, let it go. and just wash, rinse, repeat. Just
Right,
do it.
right.
I mean, the way somebody described it to me recently is like just running reality through like a wood chipper. It's like
Yeah,
the wood chipper.
yeah,
You just
yeah,
atomize
yeah.
everything. And it's very simple. It's very straightforward that way. And what I would say is, like, if you're willing to really follow the renunciate path,
Right.
that's a consistent path to follow. It's logically consistent and actually makes a certain degree of sense.
And it works.
And it's based on premises which I think everybody could accept quite readily,
Right.
which is that, hey, life is tough. Get the hell off the ride.
That's
right?
it.
And that's that path. And then the path you've been talking about, the tantric path, and the way that I understand Thelema is more like, okay, you're gonna go in whole heart,
Right.
fullness,
That's it.
fullness of heart.
You got it. That's
and
it.
that sounds crazy because basically you're talking about walking right into the mouth of the thing.
That's right.
But here's the thing:
Leap into the fire.
what's really crazy is that path that everyone does in the middle.
Right.
Thinking that you can somehow be in it, but
Right.
like somehow be on the edge
That's
of it
it.
and not get hit.
That's it. We are in complete agreement. And there's that line in the Bible about lukewarm. I don't remember. Like, either run hot or run cold, but don't, if you run lukewarm, I reject you. Something like that. And I always think about that. It's like, you can't kind of do tantric. That just makes you a party animal, right? And you can't kind of do Buddhist. That just makes you a new age, flaky person. You commit. And so, what pulled me into Buddhism was Tibetan Buddhism, and then I lived in Japan for a while, and I experienced the austere, super austere. The Japanese go all out on austere, and it's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And I experienced it, and I was like, this isn't where my will is. Like I admire it, I accept it, I totally venerate it. In fact, I'm completely in awe of people that can do it. But I'm a multicolored kind of, and then I found Tibetan Buddhism, and like, I'm home, right? And Nepal was perfect. Nepal is where I achieved the most enlightenment in terms of Tantra, because it's the center of Tantra in many ways. The gurus that are in my lineage, like Minanath and Gorakshanath and etc., have their temples there, but they're Buddhist, and every Buddhist temple has tantric shrines, and every tantric temple has Buddhist shrines. Like, they are both Buddhist and tantric. So since I was a little kid, I was drawn to Tara. Like, since I was like 5, I got glommed onto Tara for some reason. And Tara's become a major part of my spiritual practice. But again, I like the colors, I like the stuff. And then Tantra just led me into it. And once I got the initiation, once I got the Shakti pot, which is something different from other initiations, once I got the transmission of this, 3,000-4,000-year-old lineage, it fucked me up for days, for weeks. It destroyed my life for a while. I was like, what the fuck is going on? Because I've had initiations, not anything like this. Like, getting a legit lineage, everything goes to fucking hell with Tantra, because it's like, clear the deck. And you have to accept it. And all of it is just like the Buddhists. It's none of it's permanent. All of it is transitory. Everything is not what you think it is. Tantra is a path of utter liberation and moksha. And if you have attachment, you can't be involved.
What's so interesting to me is just in terms of the trajectory of Buddhism in this country and Buddhism in the West. I think that a lot of what's needed into the mainstream is a lot of the stuff that comes from Theravada tradition, like the mindfulness stuff, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
This stuff which is really kind of coming from a renunciate direction, whereas the Tantra stuff has been like more marginalized. Yet for people who are like, if you're not taking vows and you're not getting off the ride and you're in the thing, like, it seems to me that Tantra would be the more logical direction to go. And I have the same sort of like thoughts about Thelema, like, well, why wouldn't Thelema? Because Thelema is kind of like got a similar approach. It's like, this is, even Crowley says something at some point, like, this is Nibbana, but for people who are actually like involved in life and not trying to get off the ride. And it's so interesting how it's been kind of flipped, that the Theravada stuff is really kind of like front and center in the mindfulness and, equanimity and stuff. And like Tantra, I don't know if it's because of like the sexual aspects of it that people think are there. Is that what you think it is?
Yes, because we're a puritanical country. We are. I mean, people say they're not, but we were founded on the Puritans and revivalist anti-sex Christianity and people in this country. I mean, you've traveled. I travel all over the world. I've been to 30 countries, and we are the most puritanical country I've ever been in. Like, you can't show a breast on TV here. You can show somebody's head getting cut off, right? I mean, it's a classic line, but I mean, you travel around the world, even in India, which was not puritanical until the British took it over, and now it's puritanical and misogynist, right? So I think it's sex, but I also think that people, especially people raised in Judeo-Christian culture, basically they've been embedded with, when you die, there's two ways you're going to go, right? And they believe in sin, and sin is an overlay on everything. And I thought, being a pagan being a young kid and being free of that I was immune to it. When I moved to Japan for 4 years, by the second year I realized how poisoned I was by the Judeo-Christian sin ethic. Like because I'm living in a culture where they literally don't believe in sin. And so my friends who were gay were like, oh yeah, there's a gay section of Tokyo. And you talk to Japanese people, they'd be like, who cares? Mm-hmm. Like, who cares? Like, and we would talk, and I'd say, well, I wonder how many gay people you work with. And Japanese people would look at me and go, that has nothing to do with anything. Mm. Like, these people are my coworkers. Who cares what they do? Who cares if they have sex? And then they would say to you,
just don't embarrass our company.
That's right. That's right. There's a way.
Disgrace the founder.
Don't be a dick is what it boils down to. Like, don't be pay attention to our culture and don't be a typical American.
Well, to be fair, there was there were some incidents in the 80s with Tantra and some scandals and stuff and things that were used irresponsibly. But I mean, that's far enough in the past at this point that that wouldn't. I can't picture that being like a factor now.
I can't either. And then you have the Rajneeshis and Osho Rajneesh. He was a tantric, but he tried to mass consumerize it, and the whole thing turned into a cult. And Tantra is much more akin to Thelema. Thelema and Tantra are really very similar in that.
So tell me about. I mean, I know Thelema and how I sort of understand the Thelema perspective on life. Like, explain in as simple terms as you can what the tantric attitude toward life is, toward living. Like, let's say you're not even coming at it from the perspective of magic or gods and goddesses. Can you sort of translate it into a basic attitude or philosophy toward things?
All magic is biological. All magic comes from nature. Nature gives us everything. We give everything back to nature. The goal is to live in harmony with nature and with our own biology, and to understand in a deep esoteric way what nature and the universe is. And the magic we work is to become more in tune with nature and function within a natural, to live a life of, what did Dada say, equanimity and equipoise and ecstasy. And that there were times in ancient India when people lived that way. There was I don't know if you've heard the terms the tantric colleges. There were cultures, there were pre-Hindu cultures that were quite advanced, that had plumbing and they had temples that lived and breathed this philosophy. And this is when the tantras were written, and they're books of magic on how to work. Well, everybody points to the sex, but how to work sexually with someone to become more, to weave the kind of life you want. But the bottom line is that every day we weave our life, and we make the choices on either we renounce or we can make choices on what threads we're going to build into our life and how we're going to work. And it also teaches meditation and focusing on the guardian spirit. He calls the guardian spirit, we call it the Atman. And that the universe is you have elementals, and then you have there's different forms of divinity.
You're getting into a lot of esoteric stuff.
Right.
I guess what I'm kind of trying to understand is, if you are going to take that plunge into life, you're going to be susceptible to influences that are going to make you angry, that are going to make you frustrated, that are going to make you feel self-pity and sadness and all these things. What do you see as the tantric philosophy or response to those basic kind of problems?
I'm going to go right to the core of them. And it's actually the same as Buddhism. The work you do as a tantric are getting rid of the 5 kleshas. The 5 kleshas are attachment, repulsion, fear of death, ego, and ignorance. Like, that's the work. And the gods, in as much as they are us, can be invoked. Rituals can be created where we invoke the goddess Kali to remove things, or Shiva, or Lakshmi when we need money. We can invoke different archetypes. So I like Jung, right? So I'm going to use the term archetypes. We can invoke all the gods are one god, and there is no god, right? I mean, that's kind of what it boils down to. So we self-generate, just like in Buddhism, not far from Buddhism. We self-generate the gods as we choose. They're parts of us, they're parts of our archetypes. We can work with them as we work. But the main work is those 5 things, like getting rid of attachment, getting rid of repulsion, which is why you see these tantrics naked sitting on corpses burning in the cremation ground. They're getting rid of fear of death, because that inhibits everything. Mm-hmm. Getting rid of ignorance, which is right, and getting rid of ego. So you work with those 5, and that's the work that you do, and then you achieve a certain amount of enlightenment, or as much as you can, knowing that it's a spiral. That the one thing that Tantra does say is that they believes in reincarnation. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm willing to go along with it as a hypothesis. But if that's true, then as a tantric, I'm going to keep coming back as a tantric, because I'm still working on those things until I've achieved liberation. And then, just like in Buddhism, you have 2 choices, right? You can get off the wheel, or you can choose to incarnate and help everyone else get off the wheel. So it's not so different. It's just more colorful, and you get to do drugs.
I was able to do drugs before, so
so all those experiences, all those kind of ravey experiences you have, are dedicated to liberation, as opposed to distractions from Maya, right? So it's basically taking everything you do and dedicating it towards your liberation, which is similar to Thelema to me. I think Thelema needs a good, clear explanation to the common man on why it's very much like Tantra. And that's what my book is going to be. I'm trying to write it, because Dadaji sent it to he brought it to the West for a reason. He said, it's dead in India. And it's true. When I travel around India, if you say Tantric, to them it's Satanism. It really is. Like, it's people with Kali knives killing babies, right? Like, it's evil. They do sex, yeah, right. So it's kind of gone.
So did your parents.
Yeah, right. So, and plus Hindus, generally Hinduism, not always, but lots of times Hinduism venerates all these goddesses, but women are treated not very well for the most part. Whereas Tantra puts the woman on top. The goddess is more important than the god, right? I mean, because the goddess is Mahamaya, is everything, is Shakti, and Shiva is just the Bindu point in the center. So I know people who are working. A lot of people I know who are tantrics are also Thelemites. They see the Bindu of Shiva as Hadid, and they see Shakti as Nui. That makes perfect sense, right? So I mean, Thelema can be explained in this way to people. The biggest issue when I sit down to people and say, look, let me try to explain Thelema to you so you don't run away screaming. Because I mean, really, this is what it is. A lot of them are like, yeah, but that book of the law, that 3rd chapter, like, oh. So my explanation to that, I mean, I'll give it to you in like one sentence. I studied about the wrathful deities. You know what the wrathful deities are. The wrathful deities are what they're talking about in the 3rd chapter. When it says crush and destroy and all that, you're working through your stuff, is how I view it. When I've explained that to people, they suddenly have they're like, oh, it's like, oh, it's a metaphor. Yes.
Well, so, I mean, everything in the book is a metaphor. Crowley says so, that it's representing the universe.
You and I are on that page, and other people are, let's see, we come from a Judeo-Christian culture where that book is the word of God, and every word is true. And I've had numerous people say that to me. Like, no, it's in the Bible, that's true. It's like, it's been translated from Koine Greek into Latin, how can it be? God made sure it would be correct. So that literalism is the problem. It's like...
Yeah, I'm not sure I would try to explain Thelema in terms of Tantra. That's sort of like explaining the obscure in terms of the opaque, you know? And I wouldn't try to go that way necessarily.
You have
but,
a point. I was talking to someone who knew the words wrathful deity, and so that actually worked. How you would do it, I don't know.
I mean, the way that I've been trying to do it lately is what I was saying before in terms of like, well, you basically have two options. You can either pull back from the thing and go and just engage as little as possible with this world, or you can try to approach it with a certain degree of courage.
Embrace it.
And, you know, without lust of result, because, I mean, that's a very important teaching, I think, in Thelema, because if you're going to engage with reality, whatever will is, it's not always getting the outcome that you want.
Correct.
It's not manipulating reality such that you're constantly getting an outcome that you want. I don't think that's what
No, of course not.
by will at
How
all.
could it possibly be?
So it really is a certain sense, an affirmation or an acceptance of what is.
And one of the things Dadaji said, and he's right, is like one of the first things you need to do, you need to live a pagan lifestyle, i.e., sex is okay, nature is primary, but then you have to connect with your guardian spirit. And your guardian spirit is the key to both of those systems. It's like, you know, I mean, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go party, and you know, my guardian spirit will say, well, you can go party, but that's not part of the tantra work you're doing. You know, if you want to make it part of the tantra work you're doing, then you dedicate the intoxication you're doing to this. So there's a certain amount of you need that, and I notice you point that out, like Thelema and the guardian angel, like without that is the linchpin of all these systems. Like the first, you know, and I tell everybody when people say what is magic, I go, look, there's 3 steps. One, you have to know the natural world, and to me that's a pagan environment of understanding what magic is, what spells are, what the astral stuff is, what this work is. The next is Tippereth. You've got to find your holy guardian spirit, and then oh well, what's the third one? Well, just your guardian spirit will take you there. Like that's it. It's very simple. When people say to me, "What is?" I go, "These are your 3. This is the 3 steps that I found in every system." And every author pretty much more or less, if you dig down, agrees on. So they're like, oh, so the first thing I should do, I said, the first thing you should do is learn what magic is, learn what other people have done, learn about the real world. And the second is find your guardian angel, find your guardian spirit.
I mean, to me what that sounds like is having a certain degree of transcendence.
Yes.
First.
Yeah. Yes.
Seeing through the illusion and
seeing through the illusion. And I'm a little more visceral, so to me it's really reconnecting with nature and realizing that everything we are and everything we do and everything we use and everything we eat comes from nature. We are extensions of nature. We are animals within Gaia. We just happen to be animals that can talk and think, but we are animals within Gaia. And until we that's a moment you have to accept nature is preeminent and is everything comes from and goes to nature. And then you can be transcendent and say, okay, there's something more than nature. There's this thing, this Atman, this holy guardian spirit, this holy guardian angel. And whether it's real or not, and I've gone through, that's a whole other conversation, it is a perfect analogy or a perfect symbol of the consciousness that is supraconscious, that knows what I should do and where I should go before I do. When my ego is yattering this and this is over here, I know, like that's the gnosis, right? Like I'll do things and I know I shouldn't do that, and then something bad will happen. Or I know I should do something, and I'll be like, I don't want to do that, but I have to do it. Like teaching autistic kids. Like I went through a period of like, oh my God, I don't want to do that. I want to chill. And like my angel, like really, I'm getting old, right? And my angel was like, this is your will. You don't really have a choice here. If you don't do it, then you know things are not going to work out. But this is you. You have this and this, and you are supposed to do this. Like that's. It's hard to explain that to people. Like, why are you doing X, Y, or Z? Because it's my will to do it. And they're like, oh, it's something you want to do. And then that's when we're into the more transcendental conversation we're having, because this is there's nothing else in life. What is your life? it's an arc of you either doing your will or not. And mine's probably wobbly as fuck, right? Like, oh, I was doing my will here. Oh, then I, did this, then I got married. And then this happened, that, but, we're here to do our will.
The way that I tend to, if I want to kind of make a beeline to what the point of this is, and I don't want to use jargon like will, I just say something like, you don't want to be laying on your deathbed having a lot of regrets about things
that's a
you
good
didn't
one.
do.
That's a good
That's
one.
what
I may still have some, but I talk.
Try not to get in that position.
How I've explained it to people. I talk about sailing because I used to be a sailor. I said, do you know that moment when you're sailing, when you're just with the wind, and everything's going exactly right, and you don't really have to steer, and you don't really because you've hit that groove.
You're in the zone.
Or skiing. When you're skiing a perfect run and you're not thinking, because the minute you think, you fall. You and the skiing are one thing. Like that's it. And I talk to people like that, they're like, oh. So like when your mind's not, I say, yeah, you're not ego, you're not thinking, you're not cognating, you are experiencing. That's gnosis. Gnosis is when you are the experience. Like that's it. It sounds. Then you say it. It sounds so trite and stupid. Like I had an experience like after the destruction of my life. I was at the very bottom, and I had an experience with a particular drug that literally threw me above the abyss for a short period. I realized the knot that I had to pierce was that I never felt loved because I had two abusive, fucked up parents, and that all the other fucked up things in my life boiled down to no matter how many times people told me they loved me, I never deep down really owned it. And I broke through that. And I, in pure white light, pure dissolving, came back and I was like, please, Nui, let me hang on to this one thing. And that's, so I say things like in my meditation, I say, I am loved, I love. When I say it, it sounds dumb. Right?
No. Yeah, I mean, I know.
It does. You know what I mean?
I know what you're talking about.
But the truth of it is.
I mean, having struggled with similar issues, I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, but when you have the gnosis of that, it's right. It's a completely different experience. It's like a certainty, certainty of truth, and I think that's the key to all of these things. You know that Dadaji worked with Crowley, right? And he uses the term, in Tantra, the best way to sum up Tantra is svechachara, which is a word that's used all the time. And it basically, the way he translates it is, the will to love is the law to live, which is really similar to Crowley's. I like it a little bit better because it highlights love first. But tantrics will say to each other, like if someone's kind of going off, they'll say svecha, meaning do your will. Do your will, like a command, like you're fading, you're off the keel of your boat. You're starting to your jib is luffing.
So much for not knowing what anyone else's will is.
I know, right? Well, but that's what friends are for, right? That's why you have an order. That's why you have a group. Like honestly, truly, that was one of my big questions. Like, why not just do it alone? Mm-hmm. And then I met like a lot of crazy magicians who were solo. Because you get wrapped up in your own illusion.
Fantasy.
Having reality checks, having brothers and sisters who say, dude.
Oh, no, that's a real serious thing about being in a fraternity, like OTO.
Or a circle, or a coven.
You can entertain all sorts of, or even just being like married or something like that. Because your spouse is not going to have any illusions about you being a great guru.
That's right. They have different
other
illusions.
People might think you're
That's
like
right. That's exactly right. You're exactly right.
She has no illusions about you being enlightened.
In Tantra, the circle is called a kula, which means family. And it's usually, I tend to think that smaller egalitarian circles have worked better for me in terms of magic. Because when someone says to me, you're off, if we're all at the same level of
sure,
then I'm more likely to listen to someone say, dude, seriously, what the fuck? That's not right. Or you're losing your shit. Or you're looking at this experience this way. Let me tell you how I would look at it. And then you're like, whoa.
I can tell you that working in a hierarchical organization, it's hard to take that out of it. That's actually good. That's actually an interesting point.
That's why the HML.
I try to have the mentality about it where I will at least consider it. Like in front of them, I'll be like, yeah, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
But I try to go home and think about it a little bit. But it enters into it. You're right.
Well, I think
if somebody has some power over you, that is.
And that's the thing. And I mean, and even in witchcraft, people like I'm a third degree. Well, when I was a first degree, a third degree person would say, "Oh well, blah 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 blah," and I would be, yeah, but that wasn't my experience. And then I would check in with my peeps, and they'd go, "Oh, that person, you've read these books. That person has read 2 books, even though they are now this degree and they've gone through the what they needed to go through to get that degree." Experience is not reflected always in degrees, right? I mean, but having magical friends who are friends and not just is crucial to sanity. I have seen enough people spin out, burn out, lose their shit, including several members of the Grove that I work with who, I won't go into the stories, but they veered they're out. I mean, they left the path. They left all the paths. I've initiated a number of people into Tantra that completely went into the into the Kleepoth and lost it, and there's no guarantee. If you do magic is a left-hand path. Magic is a high-risk thing. Sitting zazen, doing Buddhist practice, doing something meditation every day is a better, in many ways, a better way to go. Just because it's systematic, it's clear. You're not going to spin out so often.
Sure.
But this is so fun. Magic is so much fun.
It is.
Tantra, magic, rituals.
For those with courage and a spirit of experimentation, and the way you put it earlier was really great. Sink or swim.
Sink or swim.
It does have that kind of self-guided aspect to it.
That's right. You have to have chutzpah.
It makes it a higher stakes game.
That's right. It does. It does make it.
But what's life? I mean, what the fuck
Thank
is life
you.
anyway?
What's life? Here we go. No, we have to toast on that one. Here. What's life? What's life for? Come on. What is life for? Have fun. Go balls out.
I mean, it's like
go balls out. Get some work done. Do some good things. Achieve illumination. But
one of the teachings of OTO is, in a sense, the worst that could happen is already happened. In the sense that you've been born.
That's correct.
Because being born comes with a death sentence.
Oh my God.
So there's
Buddha said the same thing, man.
It is very similar.
He said, hey baby, life is gonna be traumatic as fuck. Good luck. Achieve enlightenment.
So we all agree on the basics.
We do. I think so. And that's, talking to people as diverse as, tantrics and Hymenaeus Alpha. I mean, talking to people all over the map, everybody pretty much, once you get down to it, a couple of beers, everybody basically agrees on the same things,
Well, I mean, you're going to agree on the basic setup and that the game is rigged against you and that life is inherently unfair.
Right. That's right.
So if you go looking for fairness in life or if you go looking for nothing but satisfaction, you're going to be sorely disappointed.
Right. And if you are one of those people that's born with a silver spoon in your mouth and you never have any traumas in life, and there are people, I've met people like this, who coast through life with lots of money, lots of everything they want, they get, you're not going to grow. You're not going to really go very far with what you're doing. You're going to die and come back again and have to do it again because what did you learn? What did you get? You learn, it's like going to the gym. You learn by struggle. You learn by working on attachments, repulsions, right? Fear of death, ego, and ignorance. That's how you grow, right? And all those require work. I mean, this stuff is work. Tantra is work. Magic is work. People who, want to wave their wand and do their mantras or their spells and this is my number one issue with people who do goetic stuff, and it's fine. They do whatever they want, but you're basically asking someone else to do the work for you. Well, you're going to have to pay the bill if you're like.
Oh, you mean when you send like a spirit
or a demon, there's a lot of, that's what a lot of occultism is based on, is like you do this circle and you invoke this and then you say, go get me money, and it brings back money and yay, thank you. Well, wait a minute. There's always, payment due on anything you do. You're going to have to either make the effort or you're going to have to pay for it. Like, there's no such thing as a free ride in magic. And it's not often pretty when it comes due. I've seen some pretty bad crack-ups. People who wanted something for nothing. They're gonna get.
Well, it's been a good conversation. I mean, we covered the gamut, and
we can keep going.
We'll come back.
Yeah.
We'll come back and talk about a lot more.
Oh no, it's been really fun.
This is good.
Yeah, we're going deep on a lot of deep
We've
stuff.
gone deep on some stuff, and we've got some stuff about you, and
you got a lot about me and my craziness. Oh, I got more funny stories.
About 70s New York. All right, my friend. Well,
are we done?
I'll give you the fist bump, and
did you want to end it with anything else?
No.
Do you want to ask me what I'm writing about? No? All right, never mind.
So that concludes my interview with Denny Sargent. If you found this as entertaining as I did, let me know below in the comment section. Also be sure to visit Denny's website, linked below, and hit subscribe. Until next time, 93s.